All right, good evening, everyone. Today is Tuesday, January 31st, and I am in shock that we're already at the end of January, almost done with our first month of 2023. We have a very special board meeting tonight. It's a special retreat-style board meeting. We'll be doing some education, informational items, and training and team building for our amazing group of 5 here on our governing board. So all of our items are informational and study items, and we'll be focusing our meeting on just working together more effectively over these next 2 years as governing board members. And we have some amazing special guests with us tonight to really help facilitate that and make sure that we are ready to really be effective group members here together. Today again is January 31st. Today we celebrate the birthdays of 2 famous and very different actors born in 1977, Bobby Moynihan with SNL fame and Kerry Washington of Scandal fame. So some great birthdays today. And on this day, I'm not sure if you all knew, but on this day in 1865, Congress passes by a vote of 121 to 24 the 13th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution abolishing slavery in the U.S. And also on this day in 1928, Scotch tape was first marketed by 3M. I saw someone today using Scotch tape to clean up her scrubs from some dirt, and so we know we all have amazing uses of Scotch tape, so that happened in 1928 on this day. I'm going to start us off here with a roll call for Ms. Pena.
Ms. Shaw?
Here.
Ms. Ekstrom?
Here.
Ms. Luna Rose?
Here.
Mr. Romero?
Here.
Dr. Ravi?
Here. And our first agenda item, 1.2, is our land acknowledgement statement. We don't have students here that are set up for this, so I'm actually going to turn it over to Ms. Luna Rose to start us off with our land acknowledgement statement.
Thank you. Dr. Shaw, good evening, everybody, and happy end of the month. On behalf of the Governing Board of the Tucson Unified School District, I, Natalie Luna Rose, acknowledge that the schools, buildings, and facilities of the Tucson Unified School District reside on the ancestral homeland of the Tohono O'odham Nation and the federally recognized tribal land of the Pascua Yaqui tribe.
Thank you, Ms. Luna Rose. And for the Pledge of Allegiance, I'm going to ask Mr. Romero to lead us in that.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Romero. Dr. Trujillo, do we have any agenda adjustments for this evening?
President Shaw, no agenda adjustments recommended this evening.
Okay. And for our new governing board members, during our second meeting of the month, usually we do board member activity reports where we go through for ourselves, for the public, just what we've done over the course of the last month or since the last meeting in our roles as board members within our district. And so I'll open up the floor for anybody who wants to submit a board member activity report. Ms. Luna Rose.
Thank you, Dr. Shaw. Okay, it's been a busy month already, a busy year, I guess I should say. But I want to first start that I did attend the winter graduation back on December 22nd. It was at Catalina High School, and what just a very nice event. Ours obviously they're different from the May graduations at all our high schools, but the winter and spring graduations and the summer graduations, they all have the same feel. Everybody's really excited for their student. Some students, there was one young lady who was just graduating early. She was done with school and she didn't want to spend one more minute, and she was ready to move on to the next phase of her life. And she gave some wonderful opening remarks. And then, there's some other students who might have taken a longer time, but they were still the class of 2022, so that does not negate anything they did in their high school career and their career here at TUSD. So congratulations to all those that have moved on and maybe are at the U of A and Pima for spring semester or have gone to the military or working. And so I just wanted to congratulate them and their families for that achievement. And a couple other things. In the last week, I've kind of been doing this reaching out to some schools and taking tours. I recently was at Marshall, Solang Tom, Saguaro, and tomorrow actually I will be going to Steele. So it's just nice to go to the schools, kind of see what's going on. It kind of see how things are starting to level out a little bit with COVID. Taking the tours last year is definitely different than it is this year. You can see the difference. The students are starting to get back into the groove. Everybody's last year was still very dicey, and there's still some days where you can tell it's a little bit, but it has been just it's just been really nice, and we've got we have great schools and beautiful schools, and parents that are really involved, and kids that are excited to be at school, and teachers that are working hard, and then they care, and their staff cares. So for anybody that's listening tonight, if you have a chance to go to one of our schools for an event or support or donate to a book drive, a food drive, or a fair, please do so, and come check out what our schools and what we're doing here at Tucson Unified. Thank you.
Absolutely great message, Ms. Lona Rose. Thank you. Anybody else? Ms. Shaw?
Thank you, President Shaw. I had the opportunity to visit Davis Elementary School, and I was just so taken aback with the gorgeous building, all of the great things that are happening, the community garden where they are growing, or they have chickens over there, and so many plants that are growing strong. I was also struck by their library. If anyone hasn't been to Davis recently, they have a hydroponic garden within their library, and they're growing tilapia fish inside the library. And so it just added this whole, whole element to the library that it was just a extremely peaceful vibe in there. And so kudos to Davis Elementary. Next, I visited the Teenage Parent High School, which is an incredible resource for our students who are also parents. They have nurseries in there, 3 nurseries for children of different ages. And, listening to the principal and hearing about some of the needs that they have, I'm looking forward to, as a governing board member, seeing how we can help them even more in the future. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Ms. Shaw. Amazing. I didn't know there was fish inside the library there. I can't wait to check it out myself. Ms. Ekstrom or Mr. Romero? Mr. Romero, go ahead.
All right, so I've been doing my field trips. So since being elective, I've been and met with principals and their teams at a few of the schools. I had an opportunity to go to Utterback, McGee, University High, Johnson Primary, home of the Rainbow Makers, Choya, Tolleson, Cragen, Fruit-Timmler, Collier, and Sabino High School. Also this past Saturday, I attended a wrestling fundraiser for the Palo Verde High School wrestling team.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Romero. Ms. Ekstrom.
Thank you, President Shaw. Let's see, I've been doing quite a bit of traveling as well within the district. Soon after I was sworn in, I was eager to visit many schools. So my first school that I was able to visit was Monzo Elementary School. At Monzo, I was given a tour by 2 wonderful students where I learned about their ecology program, and it happened to be the day that they had steaming compost. So I got to learn about steaming compost and the worms that they have living in their little area, and worm juice, and I got to see tilapia fish and chiltepines. So it was just a great tour. So thank you to Principal Letorco and Ms. Evans and the 2 students who gave me a tour there. I was able to visit Ms. Flannery's 4th grade classroom and Ms. Valencia's preschool classroom. Next, I went to Line Weaver Elementary School, and I had a visit with Principal Walls. We discussed their new A letter grade, and I received all of the information on their Great OMA program. So thank you, Principal Walls, for that. And then next I went to Bricta, and I was a judge for their for their door holiday contest with Supervisor Adelita Grijalva. Each class was responsible for a country and teaching their students about Christmas in each of those countries. And it was just amazing. We saw France, Germany, Africa. It was just great. After the new year, I continued on. Next was Mission View Elementary School. I grew up right across the street from Mission View and attended kindergarten there. I met with Principal Calkins. We visited almost every classroom. I love that school. It's an amazing space. They are now a B school, which is amazing, and they're celebrating their 100th year this year. Then next, I went back to Bricta for a proper tour. I got to see every classroom at Bricta, and if anyone is ever questioning early childhood education, I strongly suggest that you visit Bricta because those students and teachers are amazing. I cannot say enough about Bricta. So thank you to Reem and to Maricela and to all the staff there that gave me a tour. And then I was able to go with Dr. Trujillo to visit 2 other preschool sites, VC and Warren Elementary. We went there through Pima County and their PEEPS program. We got to see amazing spaces there. There was all-day preschool, which is very important. So thank you to Nicole Scott and Irene Moreno from Pima County, and Reem Kivet and Maricela Robes from TUSD, Principal Rosman and Assistant Principal Sable from VC and Warren. And then to finish January, today I visit Ochoa Elementary School. Have a long history with Ochoa. I just love being at that school. It was a great day. I got to meet Student Council Treasurer Lily. She was very shy, but she was an amazing student. We just had a wonderful time looking at their gardens, and they also have chickens. They turned 100 during the pandemic and during COVID, so they're celebrating their 100th anniversary in May. So I would like to thank Principal Duarte for the tour, Miss Kara, and of course Lily. And that's all.
Thank you, Ms. Ekstrom. And I'll finish us off here with just a couple of items. I had a chance to visit McGee for the first time, had a great tour, and also got to join the 6th graders for their honor roll presentations and a principal's honor roll as well. There was a lot of fun seeing the enthusiasm amongst the 6th graders at McGee Middle School. Also had a chance to meet with our ex-ed department and get a really good feeling of what we're doing here for some of our most struggling students. So really great informational session there, as well as continuing to support and represent our governing board as the liaison for the Budget Advisory Committee during the meeting in the last couple of weeks. And then finally, I had a great opportunity this Saturday to be one of the judges sitting right here where Dr. Torrio is sitting, judging the spelling bee for the district. We had some amazing students here, and I hopefully didn't make them more nervous, but we reduced the nervousness by just admitting that when I was a 5th grader and a 6th grader, I lost by the same word 2 years in a row. It was the same word, Ariel, that knocked me out of the spelling bee 2 years in a row. A-E-R-I-A-L. I will never misspell that word ever again. But it was great being there, and congratulations to all the students and family members that were able to participate and to our champions that day. So that concludes the board activity report. I know Love of Reading is coming up, so we're going to have a probably even busier one and longer one in the February. I'm looking forward to visiting a number of schools and reading some of my kids' favorite books to students throughout our district, and I'm sure many of you will be joining a lot of our schools for Love of Reading weeks and months over the next couple of weeks as well. All right. So next is going to be our 4 items for this evening. I think we have a really amazing slate for our retreat this evening. We're going to be starting with Julie Bacon from the ASBA. She's a governing board member at Paradise Valley a school district, talking about leadership as a governing board member, best practices in school governance, and some other really important topics to help us be more kind of effective in our role. We'll be turning over to Dr. Trujillo to lead us in a talk about our strategic plan KPIs. What do those stand for? Key performance indicators, thank you. So we'll be going over, we have 6 strategic goals as a district that was approved by this governing board last year, and we'll be reviewing our key performance indicators and talking about how we're going to be measuring success for our district over the next couple of years through those KPIs. Then we'll be turning over to our legal counsel, Mr. Ross, to go over just some legal aspects of our roles as governing board members, including Robert's rules and open meeting law regulations to make sure that we're staying compliant with everything as governing board members. And then finally, last but not least, we'll be working with Ms. Tamika Sears of Sears Coaching, who's going to be working with us on leadership development and communication styles and going over DISC profiles and our work together as governing board members. So we're again starting off with Ms. Julie Bacon from the ASBA, and I'll turn it over to her for our first study informational item here.
Great, thank you, President Shaw, members of the governing board, everyone present. Thank you for having me tonight. I'm very excited to be here. I do have to admit that I am no longer a governing board member in the Paradise Valley Unified School District. I finished 12 years, December 31st, not that I was counting down or anything, but this is still my first love, working with school boards and education in general. My parents are both teachers. My daughter teaches 6th grade in Phoenix, so I'm never far away from education. I have a presentation that I want to go through with you. We're going to go through it very quickly, but I wanted to give you the whole flavor of what I would do if I had a longer period of time. So there's lots of slides in there that I won't go over, but I wanted to include them in the information that we provided. So here's what we'll talk about tonight: roles and responsibilities. I'm really talking about how the board's role is student achievement. That is our #1 priority when we are governing board members. Talk about the 8 characteristics of effective school boards, policy that governs school boards, board meetings, and then talk a little bit about board self-evaluation. So we will keep on going. And the first thing I have is a question: how many bosses does the superintendent have? What's everyone think? Ooh, 1. Now, the superintendent has 5 personalities to manage, right? And 5 different phone calls to take, and 5 emails coming from 5 different people. But you only have power, legal authority, in a publicly noticed meeting and with a quorum of members. So technically, you are a body of 1, and there's one. When you do the superintendent evaluation, you do it together, and you provide the feedback together as a board. So a little bit of a trick question, and I answered 5 the first time I had this question given to me as a new board member. So, what's the authority of an individual board member? Think about the word authority. Val, Mr. Romero, I'm so impressed.
Yeah, no.
None. None, at least no more than any other citizen. And what I want to talk about with this is, lots of school board members kind of get upset when we say this, but when we're talking about authority, we're talking about legal authority, power to do something. You have tons of influence in your communities, in your schools, everywhere that you go. You are seen as someone who is powerful and influential, and in fact you are. So just wanted to get that straightened out, because some board members are like, wait, I have power, and I'm, well, yeah, you do, but we're talking about legal power. So, and then what's the authority of the governing board as a whole? Obviously a lot. You have a lot of things to do, and you have a lot of impact on the community and the schools that you service. So Title 15 is Arizona's education code. I don't probably, this is really simple, but I just wanted you to know that most of the power comes from 15.341 and 342. So if you ever, just want to have some easy nighttime reading, you can look at those. But what we know from those is that most of the powers that are identified there are delegable. So you give that power to the superintendent to carry out, and his staff to carry out those requirements. There's a few things that only you can do, and that is approving policy, passing a budget, and then the hiring and firing performance evaluation of the superintendent. So I just kind of wanted to set that stage. I'm sure you already know that. But the board's role is to govern. So you are the oversight entity of the school district. So setting direction, policy, making sure that your budget priorities align with your strategic plan, which I hear you're going to hear more about tonight. And then provide the policies and the structure that is needed for those goals to be accomplished. And then monitoring the progress towards those goals, making sure that you're having regular updates and you're doing that work. You're accountable to the community, because if they don't like what you're doing, you won't be elected again. That is how you're responsible and accountable to them. The superintendent's job is to manage and oversee the day-to-day operations of the district, implement the policies, and establish plans to meet the goals that you've set in your strategic plan. The superintendent's accountable to the board by way of the superintendent evaluation. So we have just a couple of visual graphics for you to kind of see how this is. The governance team, which the board decides what's going to happen, and the superintendent administrators decide how it's going to happen. And I should have mentioned before, I put a folder there. The PowerPoint is in there if you want to refer to it at any time. Board superintendent relationship, really the most important relationship, because you together are the senior leadership team of the district. You set the culture, you set the standard, and what we know from research done by the National School Boards Association is that systems suffer when either one tries to overtake the responsibilities of the other. And we know that involvement with administration and operations distracts the board from the essential functions of planning, policy development, and promoting the district. So we'd like to talk about it as the superintendent will inform but not involve the board. That's kind of the difference in the way your two roles take a little bit of a diversion. And then positive relationships. I'm excited to hear you're going to do a little bit of team building. That's always fun, and something I think that a lot of boards don't pay enough attention to. I would always say to my fellow board members, you know, you're stuck with me for 4 more years, so we're going to have to learn how to get along. And so sometimes that takes some work. And so when you're talking about positive relationships, assuming that you're all here with positive intent, you all are here to serve the students in your districts. Acknowledge other points of view, even if you disagree. Identify each other's key values and leadership styles to enhance understanding. And you know, one of the things that I sometimes do with boards is ask them what their experience was as a student in our systems, because it gives us a really good background on how sometimes they feel about certain things. You know, for me, I had a great experience. I loved school. There was nothing. Now my brother or my son would have totally different things to say about their school experience. So I think it kind of shades how you feel about schools and the things that are important to you as board members. Building up the relationship capital through positive interactions. It has nothing to do with the school board. Hey, how was your vacation? You know, those kinds of things are really positive things to do. And then create opportunities to communicate like you're doing tonight, you know, and you do monthly, to have a meeting that's not just full of items to discuss and approve, but kind of retreat-based meetings. So this is just another graphic that we use to talk about the board and superintendent authority. I think the most important part of this one is that dotted line in the middle and the arrows that go up and down, because the communication has to flow both ways with intention, so that if you have expectations for how the superintendent will communicate with you, or the superintendent has expectations of how the board members will communicate, you have to talk about those things, because that's what is going to help you develop a relationship that is not only one that you can work together, but create some understanding. And So we're looking at the oversight of management and the board authority, and then superintendent authority is that leadership and supervision. And you can kind of see by those outside circles, you looked at adopting goals, adopting policies, and then the superintendent takes it from there, and you come back around and evaluate the results. And then the cycle continues. So this is, we do a couple of these scenarios and throughout this. And so I just want you to read this and let me know whether you think with a thumbs up it's an appropriate oversight, or a thumbs down when you think, oh, that board member maybe is going a little bit too far. So when do you think you know? Okay, what do we think? Up or down? Down. You're all so smart. Yeah, I mean, forgetting that we have legal, we have laws that say what we have to do with curriculum, right? And we have to, that piece. But any board member who thinks that they have the authority to just kind of tell the superintendent what to do and that everybody else is going to go with them is naive, I think. You know, and you find that sometimes when you get on boards, you think, I'm going to do 3 different things when I am elected to the board. And I felt this way too. I made some headway by the time I left, but I didn't do everything I wanted to do. I wanted at least one social worker at every single building in our system. That's my background. I'm a social worker by training and by education. And I got about 3/4 of the way there in the 12 years, but not 100%. So, making sure that you understand you need your whole board, or at least 2 other people on your board to be with you in terms of when you are looking to get something approved. And then here's a second one that I just have you read and then give me the thumbs up, thumbs down. Right, thumbs up. That is your job, to make sure that the resources that the district has, the taxpayer resources that the district has, are being used in the most effective and efficient way. Not really effective to buy technology and then not train anyone on it. And that happens all the time. You hear about that all the time, not just in school districts, but in businesses, in nonprofits, all over the place. So this would be an appropriate thing for board members to ask about, because they've approved that money and they want to make sure it's spent appropriately and that the teachers are getting what they need to be able to utilize it. Okay, well, I wanted to talk briefly, we're just going to kind of go through these 8 characteristics of effective school boards. This information is from a research study that found, they looked at a compilation of different studies on board operations and the impact on schools. And the finding was that districts where school boards demonstrated certain characteristics saw better student achievement. So I want to talk through those 8 characteristics with you. And as we're doing that, I'd love for you to just think about what do we do well here in TUSD and what could we improve upon? This is, I'm having a hard time with it. There we go. Okay. So the first one is effective school boards commit to a vision of high expectations for student achievement and quality instruction and define clear goals toward that vision. So making sure that that strategic plan is the #1 priority and that nothing distracts or detracts from the focus on that plan. Really important part of highly effective boards. Effective boards have strong beliefs and values about what is possible for students and their ability to learn, and of the system and its ability to teach all children at high levels. And what we see with this is sometimes we hear poverty, English language, learning disabilities being used as excuses. And these boards would look at it as there's an opportunity. Here's a challenge we have to overcome. We have an opportunity to make it better. And believe that all children can be successful. I think that's the most important part. If all the adults in the system believe that all kids can be successful, guess what? Kids are going to think they can be successful, and that's the most important thing. Effective school boards are accountability driven, spending less time on operational issues and more time focused on policies to improve student achievement. So again, looking at that vision, what's your mission, how are you targeting improvement with various students, various student groups, and you are not in the day-to-day operations. You're not micromanaging the superintendent and allowing the educators to do the work that they do. Now that doesn't mean you won't have opinions about things, and certainly you'll share them as governing board members and elected officials, but the actual work, letting the educators do the work that they're there to do is important. Effective school boards have collaborative relationship with staff and the community and establish strong communication structure to inform and engage both internal and external stakeholders in setting and achieving district goals. And I know in the past you've done a really great job of including your community in the development of your strategic plan, and that's a really important piece. And in effective schools, effective school boards, school board members can provide specific examples of how they connected and listened to the community. And having heard all of you speak tonight, I don't think that's a problem in TUSD, because you're out in the communities and you're talking, visiting schools and learning about them. And that's a really important part of the work of a school board member. Effective boards are data savvy. They embrace and monitor data even when the information is negative, and use it to drive continuous improvement. And sometimes we have to say, we've made a mistake, or we're not doing this as well as we want to. So using the data that you have and reviewing data regularly with your superintendent is also something that not all boards focus on, but I think it is a really effective way to give you a view into how you can improve, how you can do policy and budgeting to improve student achievement. So that negative data makes you vulnerable, but that's kind of where the magic happens sometimes, when you can say, okay, this didn't work, let's regroup and let's figure this out. Effective school boards align and sustain resources such as professional development to meet district goals. So, and it wouldn't obviously just be professional development, but it would be anything that's in your budget. So if you have a goal of really increasing math scores and you are presented with a math curriculum and asked to approve it and you all vote no, if it's something that the superintendent thinks that could be improved or could help, that might be seen as not aligning resources. But any way that you look at it, your budget should reflect your values, and it should reflect the strategic goals of the district, so that you are able to budget in that way to make it possible for students to be successful. Effective school boards lead as a united team with the superintendent, each from their respective roles with strong collaboration and mutual trust. So boards defined that initial vision and sought a superintendent who matched that vision and was able to carry it out. And then the last characteristic effective school boards take part in team development and training, sometimes with their superintendents, to build shared knowledge, values, and commitments for their improvement efforts. I don't have to say anything about that because you're all here doing it right now as we speak. So that is something that you're putting priority to, and I congratulate you for that. So policy. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on policy. I just want you to think about how policies are the law of the land. They're the rules under which the district operates, and that includes the board. I always say to board members, if you're not following your own policies, why would you expect students or staff members or parents to follow them? So if your policy says one thing, but as a board member you're doing something completely different, that's time for you to look at that. can either, one, change the policy if it's not working for the whole board, or two, decide how you're going to manage that. You have your own policies, even though you're a subscriber to ASBA's policy services, so I'm not going to go over any of that information. I just wanted to kind of give you that. The one section that I think you should really focus on in the beginning, especially you newer board members, is whatever section is, if it's, I don't know what section it is in your manual, but for us it would be the B section of where it's about board members. It's about what the board's responsibility is. Board meetings. Talk a little bit about board meetings. Obviously, these are the policies, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the types of meetings. And regular meetings we're at least required to hold them at least once a month during the school year. Special meetings like this, which you're calling a retreat or a work study session, and then the executive sessions are closed part of the meeting. And I will let your attorney take you through that a little bit more later. So your meeting agenda. This is something that some boards get caught up on how do you who can add something to an agenda, how do you add it to an agenda, is consent used, and if you pull something from consent, what happens? So I'm going to assume, being the second largest school district in Arizona, you use a consent agenda, because you wouldn't ever leave here, probably, if you didn't. And what does that look like if you have a question about that? So that would just be something that the superintendent and board should know how to do that, the process that it would be, and then when you would talk about it. And also who can add items to the agenda and how do you add them? So does that mean you call your president and let him know you want something on the agenda? I don't know do you have future agenda items on your agendas? So it's already spelled out for all of you. So that's easy. That's an easy part. The thing that you want to make sure is that you have a consistent format. You tell the public what you'll discuss. So be as clear about what the item is as possible. Provide transparency and focus on board work. I think the other thing is making sure that your practice and your policy match. Lots of boards say, well, we do it this way, but in policy it says I do something totally different. So just making sure that that's consistent. Ooh, this has sound to it. I didn't even know that happened. Wow. Board reports. I heard your board reports tonight, and they sounded great. And it really is that summary of current events, and making sure that you don't take legal action on anything that's talked about during that board report. The board president, more responsibility, but no more power. Just more work. When I retired from the board, the superintendent said to me, how did you manage to only be board president twice in 12 years? And I was like, oh, it took some doing, but I was able to manage it. So the president has to preside over the meeting, keep focus, tie the actions back to goals, ensure open meeting law is followed. That's really the responsibility of everybody in the meeting, not just the board president, but every board member as well. Make sure that there's orderly and democratic participation. Have a really good knowledge of your board policy, making sure that everyone has an opportunity to participate and is able to contribute during a meeting, during discussion items. And then managing the flow and timing of the meeting. Sometimes you're thinking, are we spending too much time on this, or should we wrap this up? So that is something, and I always said that it looks a lot easier from back there than it is up there, being board president. So here is a little scenario that we made up. That I wanted you to kind of take a look at, and we'll talk about some options for how the response would be. Okay, so here are some responses that might happen. Board President asked the Director of Transportation to answer the questions that Board Member 3 asked. Superintendent answers the questions and continues to provide information about the bus fleet. The President asks the Superintendent to put the condition of the bus fleet on a future agenda and calls for the vote. And the President acknowledges the questions, but states that any further discussion around the bus fleet may violate open meeting law. Restates the motion that's been moved and seconded and asks for a vote. So which of those do you think works in this scenario? Okay, I'm gonna give you a clue. There's 3. Oh, yeah, Mr. Romero just casually put up 3 fingers. So we would say that both 3 and 4 would work. Is the condition of the bus fleet important? Of course it is. And is it existentially related to the motion? Yes. But what we're really voting on is a field trip. The condition of the bus fleet would be of interest to, I'm sure, many people in the public. So if you wanted to talk about how many buses you have, the condition of the fleet, what a purchasing plan for the future looks like, all those kinds of things, we would recommend you have that as a separate agenda item. So the public can be noticed you're talking about it, and you have time, and the administration has time to get that information together. Imagine having to give that kind of report on the fly as the Director of Transportation. Be a little panic, I think. So that was one scenario, and then this is a second scenario. Yes, what's your question?
My question is, in your scenario, the motion is made before discussion happens. Usually our workflow, at least the last 2 years, has been a lot of discussion happens before a motion is made.
However you do it is how you do it.
Okay.
Boards do it differently, and so some do the discussion first, then do the motion. Others do the motion and then discussion. So it just depends. As long as you're doing it consistently every time, I don't think that's an issue. Would you agree with me?
They do both.
They do both. Okay. Excellent. Okay, so let's go to the next one. And this is around call to audience. Okay, I'm going to give you the choices now. Which one of these would be an appropriate response? Number 1, the dog has a problem.
Actually, no. No.
Although
my joke.
the dog might have a problem.
They might have a problem. No, I would actually say number 2.
2, right?
I think, well, and if somebody wanted to, if of a board member or the president, not necessarily saying this board, but in general, maybe wanted to cut it off and go number 5, I guess they could.
Right. We would say 2 or 5. 2 is a little bit more nice. 5 would be a little bit more abrupt. And sometimes you have to do that and call the public. I mean, it happens. But I do want to tell you that this scenario actually happened in Paradise Valley when none of these things, they didn't do any of these answers except number 2. but the principal where my kids were, she came to school one day and I went in and I was talking with her and I said, how was the board meeting? And she said, that lady across the street came and complained about our kids on her lawn in front of the board. I didn't know anything about it. So sometimes you get the most unusual things happening with boards. So the agenda is there to keep you on track, monitor the flow of the meeting. The board president and other board members can devise strategies to redirect debate or discussion that's either too long or has already been said. And then again, just talking about estimated timeframes, making sure that the discussion doesn't go on and on without any real movement forward. So those are some things to think about during the meeting. I'm really not gonna go over this because your attorney's gonna be talking about this. You don't have to have call to the public. You're not required by law to have call to the public. Most school boards that we work with in Arizona do have it because it's the right thing to do. I think one of the things that's happened during COVID is we got a lot of comments. Certainly at my school district, we sometimes had 50 call to the public cards for one meeting. And that was because we're the people, I think we're the elected officials closest to the people. And that's where they came to express frustration. So just knowing that whatever you do, you have very specific guidelines and you are consistent in those guidelines. Making sure it's easy to find online and readily available when you walk in the boardroom. Reminding board audience members of the decorum that you expect during call to the public. Planning ahead when you have a high volume expected. And call for recess if needed, if things get out of control. And the first year that I was on the board, we had a board meeting that completely lost control. Audience members were coming toward the dais, and we made the mistake of adjourning. We hadn't done anything. We'd done no business at all, the whole meeting. So that was, you live and you learn, and that was a moment where we learned you have to recess, not adjourn, because we had to come back a couple days later to do the rest of the meeting. Refrain from debate or dialogue with speakers, and maintaining that neutrality. You know, I have never responded to a public criticism when I was on the board. I just felt like it kind of accelerated the issue rather than kind of tamping it down. So, but that's up to each board member individually, and it depends on the circumstance. So that's just something to think about, but making sure that you're not reacting to criticism until the appropriate time, which is at the end of call to the public. Yes.
Thank you. A couple slides back on the presentation, it said that we can't comment on anything on the board that's not on the board agenda. And so I didn't notice that in the Arizona statutes. And I think as our policy, we are able to comment on things that aren't on the agenda if it's spoken about at the call to the audience.
Are not on the agenda?
That's not on the agenda.
I'm gonna let.
Good evening. I thought it was in one of these slides, but the statute allows for 3 things to happen with call to the audience items that aren't on the agenda. You can respond to individual criticism. A board member can do that. A board member can ask that staff look into a matter, or the board can ask that the matter be put on a future agenda. That's what you're entitled to do for items that aren't on the agenda. Anything beyond that is risking an open meeting law violation. If it's on the agenda, later on the agenda, then you can either comment on it now if it's a criticism, ask for it to be looked into, or you can wait until the agenda item and say, this was said. Here's my reaction to that when the item comes up.
Okay, thank you. I guess the question is in respond to an individual criticism. So does that word individual mean I am the individual or the individual is the district?
You are the individual.
I see.
Individual board members.
Okay, so.
And I answered that before the attorney. Listen, look at me, I'm like being presumptuous here. I hope he would correct me if I was wrong.
So, you're not wrong. I would
I'm not right either, though. I hear that coming up.
I would just say that if, let's say an audience member comes up and says, you board are idiots, you voted for this thing. A board member who voted for that, that's an individual criticism of a member who voted yes. I believe you can respond to that.
Okay, just like thinking about like if something regards to transportation is not on the agenda and there's a serious criticism of the way we handled it, I'm just supposed to refer it to staff or put it on a future agenda, not like say thank you. I can't thank them or apologize.
I think you could thank you for bringing that to our attention. Thank you for coming tonight. But
Okay, but
Yes, that you can, I think you can still be polite and not violate the open meeting law.
okay, thank you.
anything else? Okay. I'm going to keep on going and just tell you a little bit about ASBA's board self-evaluation tool. This is an online tool that we provide to school boards free of charge. We send you a link to a SurveyMonkey, and there's about 70 questions on the survey, and it gives you a massive amount of data to look at for you to decide how you want to improve your board performance. So the 5 pillars of board service that are contained in that board self-evaluation are conduct and ethics, vision, structure, accountability, and advocacy. So you get tons of, as I said, tons of data back, and then we would recommend that you talk about it in a public meeting, talk about your results, and then look at the results and decide what do we need to do differently going forward, and how can we improve what we do. So it is in policy, at least ASBA's model policies, that the board should do a self-evaluation once a year, not in statute that you have to do it, but we would fully recommend that you do it. And we think that the survey that we have created, which is research-based, gives boards a really great amount of information to improve their practice and professionalism. And that is it. Any questions? Anything I can answer?
Thank you so much, and thanks you for your dozen of years of service
Thank
to the
you.
people of Paradise Valley. I'm sure
Thank
they're missing you greatly. I'm not sure if you are. This is your 1 month anniversary of freedom here.
Yes, it is my 1 month anniversary, yes.
Not that you're counting, but we really appreciate the work that you're doing, still, and the work that ASBA is doing to make us as a stronger board. So
Great.
thank you.
Thank you so much, members of the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask for unanimous consent for a quick agenda adjustment here. Moving 3.4 next. Ms. Sears is outside guest, and while legal Robert's rules and open meeting law, I'm sure it's very tantalizing. I'm sure Ms. Sears would appreciate getting on the road before she sits through that. So it's okay, unanimous consent to move that 3.4 earlier. All right, see unanimous consent. I'll turn over to Ms. Sears to come up to the podium. So I had an opportunity to work with Ms. Sears in my professional life, and I'm really glad that she can work with our district in progress. So thank you, Ms. Sears.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. So did everyone get a chance to do their Catalyst report? The information I got said yes? And are you able to pull up Catalyst? So it's the same website that you went to for the assessment. Who here has done a DISC assessment before? Awesome. I love DISC. It is one of my favorite assessments because it's not about personality as much as it is about communication styles and how to really, at work, meet people where they are. So while you're pulling that up, I'm going to get started with a
This
video.
is DISC.
It's
It
quite
gives you
loud.
a quick, intuitive way to understand yourself and the needs and priorities of the people around you. It describes 4 basic styles: D, I, S, and C. If you have a D or dominant style, you probably speak your mind. Focus on the bottom line and take pride in winning. You most likely prefer environments where decisions get made quickly and people are empowered to take charge of their work. But you may get impatient when you're asked to slow down or take a more diplomatic approach. If you have an I or influence style, you tend to focus on the positive, take quick action, and enjoy socializing. You're probably happiest in a work environment where you're free to explore exciting possibilities and share your ideas. But you might feel drained when you have to work alone for long periods, or when people's attitudes seem too negative. Or you may have an S or steadiness style, which means you probably like to do your part, keep things calm and friendly, and collaborate. You likely work best when you're part of a supportive team where expectations are clear. But if you're pressured to move too quickly or things get tense, it can stress you out, and you might have trouble speaking up. And finally, if you have a C or conscientiousness style, you probably focus on getting things right, put time into analysis, and prefer to keep emotions in check. You tend to appreciate environments where you can work at your own pace and your expertise is valued. But you may get frustrated if you think decisions aren't being thought through, or if you're expected to do a lot of socializing. So, how do you know your style? Well, everyone has a dot. That dot tells you your disc style. Your dot can also be between 2 styles, such as in the area between I and S. And your dot's distance from the center of the circle is also important. Having a dot near the edge of your disc map means you're strongly inclined toward your style. But if your dot is close to the center, you're only slightly inclined, and characteristics from several different disc styles may resonate with you. Your dot also determines your shading. Think of the colored shading on your map as your comfort zone. It helps you understand the kinds of activities or attitudes that may come naturally to you, and those that take more energy. Keep in mind, no disc style or dot location is better than any other. And because everyone is a blend of all 4 styles, there will probably be a few aspects of the other styles that you relate to. The bottom line is, everything disc gives you a new way to understand yourself and the people around you. To see past limitations, to know when to stretch a little, and to build skills that, over time and with practice, help create a culture that works for everyone.
Okay, so I take it everyone was able to get their report, you know what you are. Any surprises when you got your results of your disc style? No? Were you able, in Catalyst, were you able to go in and download the full report yet? Need a minute? Yeah, okay. So when you download your full report, the first thing that I want you to do is go to page 10. And that is your disc map, what they just talked about, where your dot is, where that shading is, and it gives you a little bit more information about you. Let me know when you have that up.
Is that the Your Story?
If you go into, I believe it's the hamburger, and there's a like home page. To the left, there's your reports, and it's the workplace one.
Does anyone find it?
Does everyone have it?
Not.
Yep, okay.
Get into my email.
So we're starting with this one because it's your workplace priorities.
Catalyst.
And it really talks about where you focus your energy at work.
I think there's a little technical difficulty, so
Okay.
just a moment.
Not a problem.
So I do have a question, actually.
Okay.
So I heard your question earlier and I was trying to get in. I couldn't remember my password, but I figured it out. So I guess I was a little surprised that I was an S just by reading the other ones. I knew I wasn't a D and maybe kind of a C, but I thought I was more of an I, and so I thought I'd be a stronger I, but I ended up being a stronger S.
Okay.
And so I found that
What about
interesting.
I resonated with you?
You know, somebody that's a little bit outgoing, but I also like to keep the status quo sometimes too. You know, I don't like conflict too much.
Okay.
So I guess that's why it leaned that way, and I was surprised.
Yes. So the conflict aversion is very much an S type of feeling. And that's one of the reasons why it's really great to have an S on a team, because you are going to be the person that says, wait, let's back up. We were doing this great. Why do we have to change it? Which is a really good attribute to have, because sometimes people like me, I'm a D, we may want to change just for the sake of change, just because we want it done faster, we want it done now, and we need that S on the team to say, slow it down, you don't need to do this.
Good.
Any other surprises?
I did this when you worked with our team back in July, and nothing's really changed since then.
Yeah.
I actually thought I would be I'd have a little bit more green D, which makes me think like we probably shift quadrants depending on the situation sometimes.
Yes.
I know that there was a lot of times, situations, events in the district where I did have to employ more of a D style, particularly during like the Red for Ed walkouts and certainly through the early parts of the pandemic. But I think this is more, the quadrant is kind of your natural
Your
style.
natural, yep. It's
But-
where you go
Right,
when you're being you.
okay.
And your dot can move. I know that there are some people who feel like it's like you stay right there all the time, but you know, I do coaching. I'm an executive coach, and I definitely know that I've worked with people and they say, I want to be more assertive. I want to be able to move faster. And we can, through behavioral changes, get that dot to move. So when I see a dot that is moved, I'm super excited and happy, because that means that things are going in the right direction and that the behaviors are changing in the way that we want them to change. But that initial dot, that initial one is just like, it's where you are when you're comfortable. So it's like your home base.
I'll see, so I was really surprised with Dr. Trujillo's. I thought you were more fast-paced, and you seemed like more kind of move things along quicker. So I thought you were being below the line, and that CS was not what I expected from your profile. And I was also very surprised with my fellow board member Luna Rose. I thought you were more of a SI, and kind of the faster pace and more kind of team-based on some of that front. So it's just interesting seeing everyone's profiles on here as we kind of see our styles. I know mine has evolved over time. When I took this, I think I first took DISC probably 2015 or 2016 was the first time I took it, and I was very like ISD results and off the chart as you can be. And in my profile now is more DI, and I completely predicted that's where I've evolved over time in terms of working in teams and working more collaboratively, and so I was not surprised at all with my change over time.
Yeah. And there's no bad style, right? There's no bad letter to be, and you need all of those letters on teams to make good, effective decisions.
Yeah, I think I'm most pleased that we have every quadrant represented
Yes.
on our board. We have D, I, S, C, pretty evenly split amongst the six of us.
Yes.
Which I think, and I've learned over time that if everyone is kind of the same style, I think if you asked me, a dozen years ago when I first started off in leadership, I wish everyone was like me, and that's what I would have said. and you learn over time that it's so important to have people with different styles around you, that people are moving things along, and people are there to slow things down, and people are there to kind of be more data focused, and people are there to be more people focused. And to have that balance amongst the 6 of us, I think will make us a really strong board over these next 2 years as we're making some difficult and challenging decisions as a group.
All right, so if you have Catalyst up, so in that platform, the first thing there on the left-hand side, there's your intro, there's your map, and then there's your story. So that story has some kind of personalized insights based on your style and based on your assessment. So we're not gonna read through this right now. We don't have tons of time today, but definitely when you get back home or get back into the office, pay close attention to that story, because that's going to give you a lot of really good information about you. So we're going to talk a bit today about how to build better relationships. We're going to talk about how those different styles come together to build effective relationships, and how you can gain an appreciation for the perspectives that everyone here brings. So we have a bunch of videos. So as we watch the videos, these are the things to think about. What challenges are these coworkers experiencing? What did they learn to do differently? And then pay close attention, because they're going to give tips about how to work more effectively with them. So the Ds that are here, pay attention to Sally's tips, because then we're going to talk about some tips that might work for you.
So Sally, what can we say about Sally?
Well, she's decisive. She pushes us out of our comfort zones, and that gets us to a place we never really expected.
Yeah, and if we get stuck, she's the one who gets us moving again. And,
Oh, just say it, it's not a big deal.
okay, well, you can be a little intense and kind of intimidating. Honestly, I get a little nervous when we disagree.
Actually, I like your intensity, but it can seem kind of impatient at times, and it makes it seem like you're not listening. But I get it. I get that you are driven and you want to get things done.
Yeah, I think that's what I was trying to get at. When you jump in with what you think should happen, it can feel kind of abrupt. And before, my first reaction was like, does she think I'm going to screw this up? But now I realize it's because you want to get things done.
And that's why I try to get to the point quicker. And I used to get really upset when you were blunt. But now I know not to take it personally.
Yeah, same here. I just need to keep reminding myself it's not about me.
Actually, it doesn't bother me if you're blunt. I like that you get to the point. But you do move a little too fast sometimes, at least for me. You're always pushing things out the door, and I'd rather extend the deadline and make sure we get it right.
I want things to be right too, just not perfect, at least not every time.
Yeah, I know there is a balance, and I'm getting better about asking myself, is she right, or do I need to push for more time?
Well, if you think you need to push, just go for it. I have no problem confronting someone, so I forget how much harder that is for other people. I just, you guys have to say something. If you don't, I'll just think everything is good. So just tell me if there is an issue. And I hope that these kind of conversations keep getting easier.
What were some of the challenges that they have with that D style?
Fast-paced and bluntness.
Yep. Yep. Do you notice that here on the board with the D styles? So what can you do to get around that? Besides, again, you have to always assuming positive intent, right? When you walk into a conversation, assume positive intent. Like Sally said, if you don't stop me, I think it's all good. It's not like she doesn't mean to bulldoze, but she does truly think, no one said anything, so it's great. So what are some of the things that when someone with the D style is being blunt, what can you do to kind of remind yourself that they are just being themselves?
not to take it personally. Or try not to take it personally, let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm. Anything else? And for the D styles, what do you want that person that you're talking to think?
So like, you're trying to do things for the common good, you're trying to get results done so that everyone can benefit from them.
Does it ever feel like you're being rushed by a D style?
Sometimes,
Okay.
but you know, I think you have to. I think, especially being on like on a school board, you have to kind of figure out the balance. If they're going too fast, then maybe we need a little bit more discussion, or, you know, then that's okay.
I think from the superintendent perspective,
Microphones.
like recognizing a need and recognizing the intent is to get something done as quickly as possible. That's urgent, that's for students, that's for the district. And so I've worked with many Ds on the school board, and I know that that's where that comes from. And we need to solve this problem now. And my job is, especially with the D approach, is to point out if we move that quick, A can happen with the association, B can happen with the community group,
Right.
C might happen with the rest of the board. And usually they hear that and say, okay, let's talk about another approach, or maybe we present it in another way. So I think for me, that's kind of been my role, is sometimes they want to move so quickly, and if you can just talk to them about what the different obstacles
Yeah.
might be.
Put up some speed bumps?
Yeah, absolutely. And usually most of the time it's like, all right, well, we'll take another meeting, we'll do another discussion, and that really helps, versus giving no information and say, well, I don't think that's the way to go. Well, in the D's mind, you're just slowing things down, you have a sense of urgency. So I think it's important that you have to lay that out, because we also have many D's that are principals. So it's not just my work with board members, it's also my work with principals as I try to coach them sometimes, or have conversations about why isn't my staff buying in to, plug in initiative here, and let's talk about how you communicate. Let's talk about how fast you're changing the bell schedule, when maybe you need to take a little bit more time, build in a couple more structures for collaboration.
Thanks. Yeah, so it's important with those D styles to give those speed bumps, right? Not put up a wall to just say no, but explain the why, and perhaps ask for more time if more time is needed. All right. The I style. Who's the I's here? One eye?
The ayes have it.
It's a small group. You only need one for it to work. All right, so we're gonna listen to the I style.
So, who wants to go first? I'll go. Okay. Relationships. That is what it's all about for you, and you put a lot of time into them. And I used to think, maybe a little too much time. But that's just because at work, relationships are less of a priority for me. And I think that's caused some problems for us.
Yeah, a few.
Yeah, and it was getting in the way of our projects. So I made our relationship a priority. I stopped interrupting you. I started listening more, even when I knew where you were going with something. And I try not to be all business all the time. And when we talk about things other than work, I still get antsy sometimes. I'm sorry about that. But I think things are pretty good between us.
Yeah, things have come a long way. You hear me out now, and that feels good.
Yeah, I think we got along really well from the start. I mean, sure, we had some bumps along the way. Working with you can be kind of chaotic.
Very chaotic.
Yeah.
Very.
Well, you have a lot of energy and tons of ideas, and that's great. Don't get me wrong, Steph. You help us get a lot of things started, but then you can lose interest when we get into the more routine stuff.
Guilty.
Yeah, and working with you has been tricky for me because my first instinct is to think, how is that even going to work? But the first words out of my mouth are, okay, sounds good, because I want to be supportive. So for me, it's about finding a balance between stepping back and giving your ideas a chance and still finding a way to make my concerns heard.
Yeah, for me, it's easier to speak up if something isn't working, but then I go too far. I'll start picking the idea apart without really hearing you out.
Yeah, I'll be really excited about something and you will just shut it down. And then I'm left thinking, well, is that it?
I know, Anna, I'm sorry about that. If I give myself a few days to think about it, I usually come around and finding a way that we can make it work.
And I appreciate that. It lets me know that you're listening to me. And I need to feel heard. I want to feel heard. And when you do that, when all of you do that, it makes me feel like I'm part of a team. So thank you.
Okay, so how are you all making Val feel heard?
Well, I don't know if that's kind of a fair assessment yet, just because this is technically his second meeting, but I think we've been pretty open to him so far. I mean, to be truthful, but I think, you know, I know several of us have met with him on an individual level, you know, and talked to him, and I think that probably can go towards, you know, what we are going to be doing for the future. I don't know if I'm wrong in my assessment, but that's how I see it.
What works for you?
For me?
Uh-huh.
Up on the board as far as when we're having dialogue?
Yes.
Well, again, one of the great things we have Dr. Robbie, who keeps this board moving pretty good and making sure everybody's heard as far as that goes. So that's a help, and he's very conscious of that. I know for me, I guess it does. For me, it doesn't really matter because I have a way of, if I have something to say, I'm going to figure out a way to say it no matter what. And that's just my style. You know, it doesn't matter that I agree or disagree. It's not like I'm in anger in any way, shape, or form. But you know, if I believe my personality will just make sure that I can get to say what I need to say, no matter what. And so far, with the respect of the board up over here, I don't see that being an issue.
Good. Good.
You know, one thing I think is important for me, this role now, and for whoever takes over the presidency next year, and we're working with this board, is to be cognizant of kind of these styles as well. When I was running meetings in my previous position, and you know, really knowledgeable about, you know, what everyone's styles was, I knew that the I's and D's would be the first one to speak at meetings and, you know, have their piece and say their piece, you know, quickest. And so I'd have to call on the S's and C's sometimes and say, you know, we haven't heard from this person in a while, you know, what are you thinking about this issue? And so, you know, we start getting one-sided where, you know, myself or Val or Sadie or, you know, the people above the line in that quadrant, in the two quadrants above the line, you know, are more kind of talking about our opinions more frequently. You know, I might have to call on some of the folks who are, you know, S's and C's to kind of just push them a little bit to say something and to give their opinion as well. So if you see me doing that, you know, that's because of, you know, just making sure that everyone has a voice at our meetings, and it's not just the people who are the S's the I's and D's dominating the meeting as well. And so if you ever feel uncomfortable with any of that, please let me know, and you know, how I can make sure that everyone does have a voice in the role that I have as president, without putting people out of their comfort zone.
All right, let's move on to our essence.
I think the biggest difference between Tom and me is that he is really good about including other people.
Yeah, Tom, you know, you always make everyone feel like they're part of the team.
Yeah, you do.
And you know what? I think that's why we get along so well. Except I think the biggest difference in terms of work is that I tend to bounce from one project to the next, and you tend to work on something and see it through to the end. Right?
Yeah, sounds about right to me.
Yeah, and in the past, I think that caused some problems because it was hard for you to know what was going on.
Yeah, but it's gotten better.
Yeah, well, we've changed the way that we work together, and I check in with you, especially when I start switching gears.
It's totally different for me. Tom and I are actually pretty similar in how we work. We both take our time, sometimes too much time.
Yeah, there have been a few times when we've gotten ourselves stalled out on projects. You know, for me, it's hard to commit until I can see where it's going and how it's going to affect the team.
Yeah, I get it. I'm cautious too. But I think you and I both realize that we need to push ourselves, take some risks, get things done quicker.
Tom, you said something I want to get back to for a minute. You mentioned how you worry about how things are going to affect the team. You said it like it was a bad thing, but I think it's really great that you care about people and you bring their points of view back into the project.
Wait, you're saying you like that feedback?
Admittedly, there will always be a part of me that says, oh no, another opinion, he's slowing everything down. But I have learned from you that those opinions, well, you need them to get buy-in, and that actually they make everything go faster in the end. So yes, I do like it. Thanks, Tom.
Well, I mean, that's good to hear. I honestly had no idea you felt that way. But it's cool to hear that you do appreciate it. Sometimes for me, I have a hard time knowing if I should share my idea, especially if I haven't had time to think it through. But it's good to know that you actually want to hear it. Cool. Thanks, guys.
All right. So, Natalie, I believe you're the only S of the team, right? Yes. Okay. So, what do you want? What do you want as far as communication? What works the best for you?
Well, I don't mind a direct style because sometimes I can get myself bogged down in the weeds a little bit, and I really don't mind it. It kind of takes me out of my head. So everybody that's done that with me, I would prefer that. To keep, there's no reason to change that. But I also think, the video was interesting because the woman said to Mr. S, that's what I'm gonna call him, Miss I said to Mr. S that, he is a long-term project guy. And I guess I am too, but I also tend to bounce around. Like I'll have 10 windows open on my computer and I'm still bouncing around. But, I make sure I get everything done. So I think still a direct communication style, but I prefer cohesiveness of like my colleagues as well, and coming to consensus and that sort of thing.
Okay. So when a D style may think that things are taking too long, how do you guys come together to know when enough is enough?
Well, I think, I'll say that I think that and this is my opinion, and I'm really curious to see what all of you think, the way that an open meeting and public meetings are formatted and just the style of those meetings seems really counterintuitive to like the S&C style, because we can't, because of open meeting laws, talk about this issue, amongst ourselves, before it comes to the board. We're forced to stay true to open meetings, to come here, to hear everyone's opinions for the first time, see how it affects, how their opinions are on these issues. And in almost many cases, especially with like action items, make a decision that then and there without having like an opportunity to simmer on it for days and to kind of talk to other people and see how it affects others and what people's opinions are, and really distill that. So I feel like these meetings are great for D's and I's because we're like make decisions, move forward on these action items with these motions, but we don't get a chance to really stew on things like I've seen, in other work environments, that SSNCs I've worked with, really want to do.
I can agree with that. But I also think I knew, well, before I took this test, I knew that I would have to make those snap decisions. So I always try to make sure that I'm prepared, and if I do need an ear, maybe I'm talking to Dr. Trujillo or Mr. Ross or something, and they do get my regular calls, to kind of talk things out, because once I'm here, I don't want to violate any open meeting law. So I always make that due diligence, or maybe with another board member, because if I can only talk to one of them. Yeah, I guess, I guess I just like being the touchy-feely person. I don't know. Follow it. Oh.
There's nothing wrong with touchy-feely. All right, let's look at our C's.
Okay, so I don't know about you guys, but when I think of Dante, I think thorough. And then I think,
Yeah, seriously, Dante, you think of everything.
Yeah, it's not just that. You consistently think of everything. You're a machine.
Thanks.
You know what I mean. You're reliable. Don't make me get all sentimental.
Well, if we're getting all sentimental, I completely agree. We can always count on you. And I guess I don't really know if it's always gone both ways.
What do you mean?
Okay, so like for me, example, I don't know if you've always felt like you could count on me.
It's not that I couldn't count on you, it's more like I couldn't tell what was behind your ideas. I mean, I'd ask myself sometimes, where is this even going? And I'd write it off.
Yeah, I could feel that because I would be like, this is so amazing, why is he not getting it? And then like, the more I would try to explain it, the more closed off you would become. And then I would look for your reaction and it would be like, nothing. and I know that's a lot of it's on me because I was talking a mile a minute and I was super excited and I didn't realize what you wanted. Rephrase that. I didn't realize what you needed was for me to slow down and give just the facts.
If I could just chime in here, I hate slowing down, and I don't like to explain myself. But in my perfect world, I say it, you get it, we move on. I know though you need a little more time to sit with something.
And a lot more information.
Yeah. So now I get you all of my background materials, and we talk about what's working, what's not, what we need to move forward. I think that's been helpful, yeah?
Yeah, it has. I used to worry that you guys were just making up stuff as you go, but these days I feel like I have a clearer picture on where you're coming from.
Yeah, you know what was hard for me, still is sometimes, is knowing when to approach you, when to leave you alone. You know, if I have a problem, how do I bring it up to you? Like Stephanie said earlier, you're hard to read.
It's not intentional. It's hard to know what to do about it because I don't know when I'm coming across as closed off or whatever. I'm just in my head thinking. I mean, that's all.
Yeah, I get that. And instead of interrupting you when you're in the middle of something, I know that I can send you emails that you can respond to in your own time.
Yeah, emails are always good for Dante, right?
Well, emails are usually better than being interrupted. And yeah, I like my space because I like getting absorbed in what I'm doing. But that's me, and doesn't mean that I completely want to work alone. I mean, I can't do everything myself. I'm just kidding. This is a good team. It really is.
All right, so Jennifer, I think you have the C, right? So with the open meeting laws, how does that kind of conflict with your natural way of doing things?
I don't have a problem with that. I think what is probably the biggest problem is being interrupted or told, is this what you're thinking, or this is the way that you think. I don't appreciate that kind of style. And I don't have trouble making quick decisions. That's never been a problem for me. But I do thoroughly study, things that I do have questions for. I ask those questions beforehand. And I think the other thing in reading my style here, I think I'm more empathetic than maybe the questions were, the way that I answered. So, that's a little bit different for me too. I think I'm more empathetic to people.
Okay.
But yes, I'm hard to read, very hard to read.
How does that impact the board when you're hard to read?
I'm sure people are thinking, what is she thinking? What is she doing? But I appreciate bluntness. I appreciate people talking to me, reaching out. And yes, email is better. But yes, I appreciate that all. I mean, I'm never too closed off to not listen to my colleagues. That's one thing that I pride myself on.
Okay. So there's going to be probably tons of things that come up throughout the year that you have wildly different opinions on. I'm just taking a guess here that's gonna happen here on the board. What are some of the ways that you can express your opinion in ways that lets the board know that that is your opinion, but you are open to other opinions and it's being expressed in a respectful way? So start with my D's, because that's probably the hardest one as far as making sure that you're expressing yourself in a way that lets other people know that you're open.
Can you repeat the question?
How do you give your opinion in a way that lets people know that you are open to other opinions?
I think I usually express that, like, you know, I'm open to hearing from other board members and their ideas.
Okay.
I think in this role, a lot of it is, not speaking first is part of it, is, keep my opinion to myself until I've had other people a chance to speak. And I've maybe once or twice or a couple hundred times been accused of always trying to move things forward with my own opinion first to kind of set the stage. And so being careful about making sure other people have a chance to speak and say something first before I chime in.
Good.
So one of the lessons I learned over these many years, it's perspective. So if I go to you and I go, this folder says ASBA, you say, no, it doesn't, because it does. From where I'm looking at it, it does say ASBA, but you don't see ASBA. Same thing when we're working here together. I might see something a certain way that none of my other colleagues are seeing. How do we let them see through my eyes and I see through their eyes and come to an understanding of where they're standing from? Because we all came from different different backgrounds, and the challenge we're going to have here is how do we be successful when we work together? Because we know in any type of team, even in work, without a successful team, you're not going to have successful results. So ultimately, we know student achievement is our main goal, but here, how we work together.
Right. So how are you going to work together? What does that look like?
I think it's part of it is asking each other some of the difficult questions and being willing to be vulnerable and being able to speak freely and be willing to listen to other views that you don't possibly believe, and being able to be welcoming and not turn the light switch off like I'm not listening to you because you're totally wrong. And that's respect when it comes to everybody here on the board. We need to have that respect with each other, and we'll have our own friendships and relationships with each other. But at the end of the day, again, we're working for the TUSD school district.
Right, and for the good of the district.
I wish Julie was still here to kind of ask this question, but one thing as an observation I haven't seen us do very often these last 2 years is really kind of talk amongst ourselves when we're talking about issues. We're not asking each other questions or trying to dig a little deeper in that. We kind of just say our thing and the next person says their thing, and we're kind of just talking amongst ourselves as opposed to talking with each other. I'm not sure what your observation is from previous boards. Is there boards that do things differently? That's been my observation. We don't if someone says something, we don't have a way we've done things. It hasn't been facilitated to really kind of understand better where people are coming from.
I think President Shaw, you're right. I think largely every iteration of the board that I've worked with, any speaking that's done by a member is more of a positional statement. This is my stance on this particular agenda item. And then the president allows another board member to speak. What I haven't seen and what I think would be really effective is board member A, you've expressed some hesitance to support initiative A. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what would make you feel better about moving forward? What are some things that we could do? Or you've stated a particular position on issue A. Can you give us some rationale? I think that those are things I haven't seen that probably would be very effective additions to the discussions. Is that sort of talking with each other and sort of understanding where everybody's coming from?
Yeah. I think when you're able to give the why for your opinion, you do feel heard and you feel so much better. And like Val said, he can see the letters, nobody else could, right? So he has a why, and that why will turn around the folder and let everybody else see it. Is that a change that will be able to be made on the board?
I think so. I think that's a very feasible change. I think also having worked with board members, different iterations of the board where I've had at least one pure I. And the I's relationships are everything. They're all up in the schools. They know people's families. They know from the custodians to teachers to social workers to principals to administrators. And they honestly take that to heart, and they want to represent those experiences that they've had in the schools. They want to represent them up here on the dais. So they're not necessarily listening to all logic, right? We were trying to say a particular issue, here's what policy says, here's what you're competing with is all those relationships, and they want to tell you about that. And I think making those types of adjustments kind of opens the door for the I's to kind of share, you know, what their experience is interfacing with all kinds of different people around an issue.
Yep, and everyone brings their own personal experience to the board. And so I think it is important that you all do understand the wide range of experiences and the richness and the diverse board that you have, so that you can be inclusive of all of those experiences. Because if you don't quite understand where someone's coming from, it's a little bit harder to really kind of get on board with them and include them. So you mentioned being vulnerable. Absolutely, right? You have to be vulnerable with each other so that someone doesn't feel like they can't speak up, or someone doesn't feel like they can't give their opinion and the why behind it. Does that make sense?
I asked the group, like, if, you know, what suggestions you have from your observation the last 2 years or other boards you've been on, you know, how we can facilitate more of a conversation as opposed to just everyone taking turns saying their position. Yeah, go ahead.
I would say if someone like me gives a impassioned speech or comments on something, and for 2 years it's pretty much crickets from the board, no comment, just moving along, that doesn't create a cohesive group.
I would agree.
And maybe Ms. Shaw, you know, I've been guilty of that, so one, my apologies. And two, you know, something that in these next 2 years we can, you know, we make it more of a back and forth, you know, and perhaps I'm not going to agree with what you're saying, but I could acknowledge at least your comment there, because that's not really fair. I mean, we're here to make the life of the district and the students and the teachers better, so to not acknowledge is, you know, we need to, the rest of us need to be more cognizant of that.
So I think one of the nice things here, having kind of a freshman and sophomore group here in our current board, we don't have somebody that's going to be basically kind of overrunning the board. I think we're all elected here from different constituencies to represent the city. I think showing this respectful dialogue that we're kind of talking about here and kind of creating a different way that we do things, make it more conversational. But then again, that's the I, conversational, about friendships and relationships. But so for me, that's fine. I can work in that style of demographic because that's who I am. But then again, the structure-wise with the other board members too.
And I'll work, you know, in this role as presidency to kind of try to facilitate that as well. You know, I think one example, like last meeting when I think it was you, Sadie, that was going back and forth with the staff member. It's not just for us, but also it's not just a one question and then move on. Like, you know, we need to have conversations with everyone in terms of our decision making. You know, whether it's with our staff members, with each other, with our leadership team, so that we can really understand the issue. Because this is really our only opportunity to do so. Like when we're up here on the dais, you know, we haven't had an opportunity to really talk amongst ourselves, to talk about this issue with staff, or really dig into these issues to really know that we're making the most informed decision and the best decision, you know, for our community. And you know, how to balance, like, you know, yes, we don't want to be, you know, trying to make decisions at 10 o'clock after all of us have been working for 14 hours, but we also need a chance to make sure we're making the right decisions and have the information we need.
One of the things that I think is really going well, and I want to comment that and compliment President Shaw, what he's done that his predecessors have kind of struggled to do for various reasons, largely work schedules, time, and not to suggest he's not a busy professional, but he's really started focusing on communication and conversations outside of the board meetings. And as a president, checking in with each board member, maybe doing coffee, maybe inviting just for a sit-down conversation. I think the more that they interact with each other and find out what their philosophies and beliefs are before the lights go on, because these lights represent showtime. You're in front of the entire city. And so you're by that point, at some point you have to give a position statement. The people that supported you are there, the employees are watching, the kids are watching, right? So in the comfort of coffee or something outside of a Tuesday night, I think that is probably one of the more effective strategies, not just from a presidential board president lens, but just in each individual board members, especially when big ticket items, right, like the budget, or we're in the midst of revising the student code of conduct. We know that there's a wealth of different beliefs and attitudes and opinions about school discipline. The more those conversations are had one-on-one in different iterations, board member 1 with 2, 2 with 3, 3 with 4, staying within open meeting law, and the more they understand each other's perspectives, I think a lot of this becomes easier. If the first conversation you're having and learning that somebody really vehemently disagrees with your perspective is up here, it makes for a tough night. Yep. So.
And I'm sure the lawyer will be able to help you guys know who you can talk to and when and what and all of that yummy good stuff.
Yeah, I know they know that's a challenge. You just have to know what your agenda is when you're doing those one-on-one meetings with each other. But I would agree with Dr. Trujillo that in my experience, boards that have each member has a lot of communication with each of the other members outside of the lights, those are the boards that seem to work best.
Good. So the reason I wanted you all to be in the Catalyst system, which I'm sure you guys have all been in, is because there's a bunch of information in there. So I would just recommend that before the next board meeting, get into the system and go through everyone's profile. And it says, how that person is under stress, how they want to be communicated with, and take that into consideration when you come to the meeting and when you're up there and you're trying to resolve these huge issues. I mean, a school budget, that's a huge issue that there's going to be a lot of different opinions on. So take that person's communication style, their wants and their needs into consideration when you step onto that platform there.
Can I recommend one part of the website to my colleagues? So when you click on, if you click on in the bottom of the main page and you see everyone else's profiles, and there's a 1 and 2 for the 5 of the other team members, including Dr. Trujillo, you can click on us, one of the other team members, and then my favorite part is compare your tendencies. So you can kind of go to that part in details and kind of say on an issue, so I'm looking at accommodating and strong-willed and my tendencies and another person's tendencies, and see where our differences are. And I've used that to really kind of help, facilitate, okay, what are our biggest, areas of conflict, and how do we mitigate some of that before you go into situations. I found that to be, really helpful in other settings. And understand how to better work with someone, and how to work with someone who's also the same style, because there's conflicts among some of the same style, but also how to work with someone with a different style more effectively.
Any questions?
Thank you. I don't have a question. I just have a comment, and it's very DE of me to say this. But I feel like the D's are getting the short end of the stick. But all those words have sort of a negative connotation. I'm just wondering if you could tell John Wiley and Sons to change the D from dominance to direct, because I'm not sure if dominance is the best word. I also have other words that would be better down there. But yeah.
They are open to suggestions. I'm a D as well, and I'm fine with being dominant.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And seriously, if you do have suggestions, send me an email and I'll get them over to Wiley. Anything else?
Well, thank you so much for coming here with us today. I think this is a really great kind of starting salvo to really help just us work better and more effectively as a team, and hopefully we'll pay dividends in the years ahead.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we talked a lot about kind of our styles and kind of running these meetings. And I think one question, just in the same topic, in terms of our meetings and our styles, I came from Chicago, and especially working in the communities in downtown Chicago, especially working with the African American communities I was working with there, things were very formal. Like everyone was doctor or Mrs. or Mr. And then coming to Tucson, I come into the Banner U of A system. It was very informal, like especially amongst the physicians, everyone was first name basis and a really different kind of sense of how we communicated. And then coming here, everything is Mr. Romero and Miss Luna Rose and Dr. Trujillo, and that kind of was off-putting to me when we first started working together on this board 2 years ago, and just want to kind of hear what people want to be called. Do people want to have that formal last name with a formal title? Do people just want to be the first name basis when we're having these meetings, or what do people prefer? Go ahead, Val.
Yeah, I will speak again. Yeah, so again, for me, same way, very informal for the most part. This is kind of a whole new the way to talk with each other on that by the last names. A lot of times when I'm doing stuff, whether it be in business or networking and things of that nature, you get to know people as Robbie, Sadie, Natalie, Jennifer. That's what, for an I, when someone says your first name, that's what gets you going. That's the it feels good to hear those types of things. So I know for me, for a lot of my meetings, everything's on a first name basis, just because it's comfortable, and I like hearing saying other people's names and seeing them smile when you acknowledge them.
I think it depends on the situation, but here at the board meeting, I prefer Ms. Shaw, but yeah, outside of the dais, just call me, whatever.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. It's just respectful. Ms. Ekstrom's fine, and of course, outside Jennifer, Jen, if you will. Not a lot of people call me Jen, but I just think here on the dais, we want to be respectful of one another, and I think just keeping it as is good for me.
I'm fine either way. Truthfully, speaking as a Tucson native, it is a Tucson thing to be really laid back and informal. It is. I hear laughing because it's true. But I think up here, we hold the titles of board members, so I think just to be respectful during the meetings. And I also, with what Ms. Shaw said, that I think it also just depends on the situation. If it's, Principal X from Y school and their kids are coming to play for us, and we know them personally, thanks, Bob, I think that's okay. But I think if we're having a deep discussion about a budget or something that's coming up the pike, I think the formality probably is best.
All right, well, thanks everyone for that conversation there. And so I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Ross, Attorney Ross, to take us through some really important discussions about making sure we stay compliant as a board these next 2 years on OML and kind of the way we run meetings. Mr. Ross, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and good evening, board members. Hopefully, I'm going to start off with the open meeting law, and hopefully the first part of this is review, but if you want to stop and ask any questions, I'm happy to do that. I talk about the open meeting law quite a bit, Arizona School Board Association conferences, site councils, with you at least annually. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about today first is a review, and then we'll go into, so that's the Open Meeting Law 101, and then we'll do some advanced, the graduate level kind of issues that have come up, maybe not here, but in other places. So the advanced topics are, is it a meeting, issues with the agenda, and issues with minutes. So now to the overview. So the statute where the open meeting law is 38431 and extended. Doesn't change a heck of a lot year to year, although there are Attorney General opinions that interpret it. And if you go to the Attorney General's website, there's a nice selection of, you can search for Attorney General opinions for keywords. You can also look at the Attorney General's manual that they have that has, they have several topics: public records, open meetings, conflicts of interest. The open meeting one is fairly well done and broken up in a way that's easy to understand and also word searchable. So if you're looking for a particular issue. The purpose of the open meeting law is, of course, to have the public informed of government business. There's nothing done in secret with government unless it's statutorily allowed to be in secret, and there isn't much of that in school boards except for student matters and some personnel matters. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I have a question. So, does the open meeting law, does it change when there's because we have a new Attorney General, does it change, or do they review those? And, because I mean, there's statutes, so that's set by the legislature, correct?
Right.
So, do they review it and update it just like you said, and do they make any change to it when there's a new one?
You'll see nuanced changes as requests for Attorney General opinions are sent to the Attorney General, and there may be some minor philosophical differences from one Attorney General administration to another, but they do treat it an awful lot like a court system. They're going to look at previous opinions. They don't want to make a hard left turn without a signal. So they're going to look at, unless somebody comes on and says, that last Attorney General opinion was completely wrong, and that's happened a few times, and you can see that when you go through some of the opinions, but it's not very often. They're going to, it's a precedent kind of mindset. Well, there was an Attorney General opinion in 1983 and another one in 2006 that were consistent. We're going to have to be convinced strongly why we should change that. That's been the approach of the Attorneys General here. I will say that it wasn't that way in Colorado. They did make hard left turns and right turns and circles, and you did have a completely different opinion from one administration to another on some issues with the open meeting law.
Thank you.
So the open meeting law applies to public bodies, which is you. You are a public body. Any advisory committees that you have, so your budget advisory, your employee benefits trust, technology oversight, audit committee, the open meeting law applies to them. It also applies to any subcommittees that you all might form, which this board has not ever formed a subcommittee of the board that I can recall here, except maybe 15 years ago when there was an agenda committee that had a couple of board members on it. It also applies to site councils, of course. They're a statutory public body. When does it apply? It applies to whenever there's a gathering of a quorum of the public body or the committee and you're discussing public business. So if you all gather at a U of A basketball game and you're just talking about the basketball game, then that's not an open meeting law situation. That's not a meeting. So if all of you are just happen to see each other in a public event and you're not talking about public business, that's not a meeting. A gathering does not have to be all at one time either. So the Attorney General has, this is something that hasn't changed, consistently said that if you do serial communications, not all at one time, but like in an email, so say two of you start an email and then you send it to a third about a topic that may come before the board, that can be considered a meeting. and it has to be done in public with notice. So watch emails is the message there, and also watch serial conversations. So two of you talk about an issue in the parking lot, and then one of you talks to another one about that same thing in the conversation that the first two of you had. That can be a violation of the open meeting law. This is the challenge that you have, right? In being able to communicate with one another and feel out, what will fly with this board without having to do it in public. That's a challenge that the open meeting law provides, and it does for just about everybody in the country that's on a public body. So if it's a meeting, it has to be in public. The law requires notice, and you all know this, 24 hours in advance of any meeting. Of course, your policy says that you want your notices and agendas to be posted earlier than that. And the notice has to be given not just to the public, but to each member of the public body. That seems obvious, but believe me, that has been an issue in other places that I have been, where they weren't particularly excited about calling a new meeting and having this particular board member there, so the notice was a little bit under the radar. That was a problem, obviously, with the law. It hasn't been a problem here. You have good policies on this, and the board members, you all vote on when your meetings are, so you know exactly when they're going to be. So the agenda, the law requires that the agenda specifically list items to be discussed or decided, and it needs to be in plain language, not burying it in jargon, which is something that education is really good at, is jargon. Putting a bunch of alphabet soup without the public, someone of average intelligence would be able to decipher what it is you're going to discuss. It needs to be in plain language. If during a meeting you drift off, and there was one of the examples that Janet gave earlier about the drift of the conversation from going on a field trip to the state of the bus pool, that would be off topic, and this board has been very good about reeling that in. It may be a really good conversation to have, but make sure that it's on the agenda, especially if there starts to be something more than just a mention of it and it becomes a full discussion and it offends somebody, you're going to get a complaint about it. I try not to step in unless it gets really out of bounds. I let you guys try to do that first, but if it does, I will do a signal one way or the other, raising my hand. And usually if it gets that far, even if I just raise my hand, there's recognition by the board saying, oh yeah, we've gone a little far. You're allowed by law to have executive sessions for specific issues. Legal advice is a big one, negotiations with your employee groups, contract negotiations, and personnel issues regarding the assignment, dismissal, and salaries of individuals, not of a whole group. That would be negotiations with a whole group, but if it's an individual. Yes, Dr. Shaw.
Finish this, I have a question about the previous slide.
Sure.
So on the agenda, in terms of so we had to post a meeting within 24 hours. Our policies are trying to post them, even before then. When can we make changes to the agenda?
24 hours is the legal limit.
Okay.
You can, I will say, adding things to the agenda. You can always not cover something. So you can decide, I wouldn't take it off the agenda within the 24 hours, but you can decide when you get here, we have 33 things on the agenda. We're not going to deal with 4 of those tonight. But if you want to add 4 more within the 24 hours, unless it's a statutory emergency, which means something horrible is going to happen if you don't take immediate action, then you can't add anything by law within that 24 hours.
And that's 24 hours before the 4:30 start time of our,
right.
of our normal meetings.
Yes. So, this board usually has an executive session that starts earlier than the public session. That's the start time. When you first come out here to vote to go into an executive session, that's your deadline. Not the public meeting time, but the executive session time. Yes?
And that's any day, right? So it could be on a Sunday that it goes off if the meeting starts on Monday.
That's right.
Got it.
Yeah, the law doesn't accept or overly include weekends. So if you had your meetings on a Monday, then Sunday would be the 24-hour deadline. Now, again, you have policies, you know, about getting agendas posted earlier and also agenda items. Now, remember there's a difference between the agenda, which is the topic that that's going to be discussed, and all the backup material. Your policy says the backup material should be there Friday before a Tuesday meeting, unless there's, you know, extenuating circumstances, and then you all want notice of that so you know to go look, right? But the backup materials are not the agenda. Those are not required to be provided to anyone. Some of them you don't have to provide to anyone at all, except yourselves, unless it's something that's acted on and then attached to the minutes. You don't have to do that. It's a good practice. This is a very transparent thinking board, always has been with things like that, and the public expects it. So, you know, if you're going to have attachments that are going to be discussed in depth on the board, you want the public to see them as well, not only so they can give you their opinions, because some of those opinions are great from this microphone during call to the audience, but also perhaps to contact you between their posting on a Friday and the Tuesday, so that you have insight from your constituents. So that's the best practice, but it's not legally required to have all the backup material posted. There are some statutory things about budget that need to be posted, but that's you know, those are special statutes for that.
Thank you. That was actually my question, is that, like, oftentimes, yes, the agenda will be posted within the time frame, but we won't get the packet that relates to an agenda item until sometimes a few hours before our meeting, and, you know, sometimes it's, you know, 80-page document, depending on what's being discussed. And so I wonder if, like you said, it's sort of our policy that is posted by Friday, but what can we do as a board to make sure that those presentations are posted, you know, within a reasonable time, so the board can prepare and the public can understand what's going to be discussed?
I would say that's a discussion with the superintendent.
Okay, thank you.
I know that in some situations with this board and with other boards that I've worked with, that, you know, it may be an important matter for the administration to get done, but the board didn't feel they were properly informed in enough time, and they put the item off. And, you know, if that's something important to the administration, they will change. But either way, to me, it's an issue that the board should address with the superintendent if that's an issue. Okay, executive sessions, again, legal advice, negotiations, personnel issues, and we're talking about personnel about specific individuals. If you're talking about groups, that's negotiations for, you know, working conditions, salaries, and such. You can meet with your negotiators. The executive sessions are private and confidential. You cannot disclose anything in an executive session, but they're not secret, meaning there's going to be minutes. The minutes can be subpoenaed. The Attorney General can review them for complaints of violation of the open meeting law. That makes some sense, right? And if they're subpoenaed and properly you know, done so, then they can be disclosed. That doesn't happen very often. Agenda and minutes are required. Minutes are required to be recorded or written. This district has both. And either something in writing or the recording needs to be available to the public within 3 working days. This district, in the past 4 years, has done a very good job of that. And again, the executive session minutes remain confidential. Now, if one of you is absent at an executive session, you can request the minutes from that executive session. So it's not, you know, you get to see them, but they can't be disclosed to anyone else. And here are all the things that legally the minutes must include: when the meeting was and where it was, who was there and who was absent, the general description of the matters considered, and that's pretty much your agenda, right? A description of the decisions made, the names of members who propose, that's who makes the motion, and then the names of anybody making presentations to the group and any action taken by the board. The good news for you is this is all in board docs. The board office staff doesn't have to do detailed minutes. Board docs does most of that for you, and especially if everybody's done a good job of drafting the motions, a lot of that work is done, but then there's room for you all to go through the amendment process for motions or make your own motions as long as it's germane to the item. So that's the legal requirement for minutes. The public has a right to attend your meetings under the open meeting law. They can listen, they can record it. These are the rights that they have under the statute. What they do not have a right to do is speak other than your policy that allows for a call to the audience. There's no statute, as Janet said, that requires a call to the audience. That it is, of course, the right thing to do, and you all, I think, appreciate that. The public does not have a right to disrupt the meeting, and when a disruption occurs, then the person who's disruptive can be excluded. And my recommendation is always to make sure there are several warnings on the record before you take that action. Janet mentioned recessing a meeting. That is an option. I wouldn't call that nuclear, but pretty close to it. My view is that it needs to be a pretty substantial disruption that you wouldn't be able to get back to your business of the meeting, or another speaker to come up if they're disrupting during call to the audience by taking an extended recess. Fortunately, that doesn't happen very often, but when it does happen, you want to make sure that you've got a good record that you're talking about the disruption to the meeting, not the content of what the person's saying. Because they do have a First Amendment right to say pretty much anything they want to their public body. It's just how they do it. It can be the problem, and interrupting other folks, not letting you go on with the business. Yes, sir.
As the clerk, I know running the call to the audience, so if something like that happens during the call to the audience, what is a good protocol to, if they're getting disruptive, to give them a warning?
So, okay, let's flesh out that scenario. So they have their 3 minutes, and then they keep speaking after the time is up. That kind of disruption. I mean, there can be other people behind that are disruptive as well.
Say like, yes, people behind or something like that, yeah.
And that can happen anytime, not just call to the audience, but at any time. Well, the chair is responsible for maintaining the order of the meeting. And if the chair is not doing that, I would encourage board members to request that the chair ask for order. And the chair can, that gavel's there for a reason, to get people's attention, although people don't use it. You don't have it?
Is there a gavel? I don't think a gavel.
You guys don't have the gavel?
Is it in the budget?
Well, you've got the microphone and the button. So, the first is to say you'll want order in the board meeting, and you state there's somebody speaking and let that person finish. Then it's you want to say, now is not the time for you to speak. This is the business portion of the meeting. And then if they're still interrupting, then the chair can ask, or board members can ask the chair to do this, to ask our lovely school safety folks to address the situation. We don't want them to get rough with it. If it looks like it's going to get testy, then that's a time to say call a brief recess, and then make sure that the issue is cleared out. That doesn't happen very often, fortunately. Usually a warning is enough from the board, and I know that chairs usually give us a little bit of leeway. If there's an emotional issue, there might be an emotional response for a second or two. When it goes beyond that and it's interfering with the next item or the speaker, that's when then you all need to step in as a chair or as individual members, asking the chair if it's not being taken care of. Thanks. Did have one situation in another district where there was this gentleman making a documentary, and we knew he was doing it, and they put tape on right over where Yolanda is, in that area where he could put his camera, and he arranged that beforehand. But then when a particular issue came up that he was interested in, he went out of there and he went right in front of the board member. That's like where Ms. Shaw is, and the chair gave a warning, and he wouldn't move. In fact, I think he was actually enjoying the fact that he was getting warned about, by the chair, and that happened three warnings. Sir, you're going to have to move back to your designated area, and then finally the chair asked for the school safety folks, actually it was sheriff's department in that district, to ask to get him to move there, to move him back to his spot, not to remove him. He wouldn't move, and then it became a little bit of a struggle, and the chair called for a brief recess while he and his equipment were removed. He sued the board and lost. He said it was his First Amendment right to stick a camera in the board member's face during a meeting. He did not prevail on that. We talked about this a little bit earlier. An individual member can respond to individual criticism. I've given you my view on that. You can ask staff to review a matter and ask to place an item on a future agenda. Okay, if there's a violation of the open meeting law, actions taken are null and void. And there can be a $500 civil penalty for each violation, not just for the person who violates it, but anybody who helps them. So you're not going to get me helping you to get around the open meeting law. And a award of reasonable attorney's fees, if that is such a thing. It's probably going to be more than $500. I'll tell you that. If the intent is to provide the public with information, then the public body member can actually be removed from office. That doesn't happen often in Arizona. There was an issue in Scottsdale a few years ago. Okay, that's the overview. So, we ready for the graduate level? Okay. So here's the scenario. The board figures out a way to go to a live Google Doc from the privacy of their own homes, and have that live Google Doc accessible to the community at no charge. And the board members in the live doc, edit that document, put comments in so that the public can see clearly who is doing that. So, their name is on there, so they can see that, Mr. Romero is changing there to there. Is that a meeting? Who says it's a meeting? Is it lawful to do that? Who thinks it is?
Did you say that we told the public that we would be doing this?
You did a notice, you made it accessible.
Okay. So it is lawful?
They can't hear you, they can only see your typing on a screen.
Not sure.
Who says yes, you can do that?
Sure, I'll say yes.
Who says no? Who says I'm not sure? So the Attorney General said you can do that.
Oh, all right. Good job.
So as long as you can figure, and this was in 2008. So I think Google Docs was maybe 5 or 6 years old at that point. But you can do that as long as the public has full access to it. You give a notice, and that they can clearly see who is proposing the action. So the open meeting law says that the public is able to observe and listen, but if the meeting is silent, that doesn't mean you're violating the open meeting law. As long as they can see who is proposing what, and they have free access to it. So that was fun. So if you ever want to do that, if you want to wordsmith a document, which I'm not sure I would recommend in many cases, but you can do that. It may be good for some of your committees who have trouble, getting together. Okay.
The Family Life curriculum did that.
Yes. No, they did. And the public was able to see that. That must have been fun. Do you know how many people were watching that, by the way? Did you were you able to find out? No. Okay. Here's another scenario. Is it a meeting? So this is the graduate level as well. So there's an email from a board member to all board members saying, this. I want to put the new logo on the next agenda. Okay. So it's one board member sending it to all board members. Who says that's okay?
Do you mean you want to put the new logo on the document or to have it agendized?
I'm sorry, to discuss the new logo.
Oh, okay.
If I should make that clearer. Well, this is actually what the person said, so I put it. I want to put the new logo on the next agenda. Is that okay? Okay. We'll delay the answer for a moment. Okay, here was the logo. It was the town of Gilbert. And so they produced this logo, and there was some criticism about it, thinking the prevailing one was that it looked like an overweight guy hunkering over the toilet. So that was the discussion in the community, and why one of the city council members wanted it on the agenda. So the first thing that the member said was this: that is okay. Proposing that the board discuss an item on the agenda, the Attorney General has said, is not legal action. Okay? But this is what, so here's what: proposing that the board have the opportunity to consider a subject at a future meeting without more doesn't propose legal action, doesn't violate the OML. That's why you have your last item on your board agenda for future items. All that is what's the item? No discussion of it, no discussion of the merits. As long as you're discussing, just saying, I want this on an agenda, that's not a violation. It's consistent with one of the three things you can do with public comment as well, right? Here's what this city council member added: there are things happening with this logo that are not appropriate, and I'm appalled. Anybody think that's okay? Open meeting law wise?
Well, didn't you just say that if it's just they wanted to put the logo without any sort of qualifier to that? I mean, that's when it becomes a discussion.
That's right. That's what the AG said. Now, is this committee member actually proposing a particular legal action? Not really, but you can infer it, right? That they want to change it. And that's where the Attorney General said that they went too far and found an open meeting law violation. So just saying, I want this on the agenda, mouth closed, that is fine. If you start editorializing on it and give any indication of a position on it, that's when there's a risk of an open meeting law violation. So a one-way electronic communication, so that's the one email from one member to another, that's the first situation, that's sent to a quorum of the public body and proposes legal action, that is a meeting. So that whole communication would need to be noticed and the public able to see it. So I guess a live text chain that the whole world can see could be a meeting if you've given notice of it. And then an exchange among board members. So there's the one-way communication, proposing legal action among a quorum, that's a meeting. And then an exchange among the quorum of the public body that involves discussion, deliberation, or the taking of legal action. So even just giving information about an issue can be a violation. It can be a meeting unless you've noticed it and the public is able to see it. Then it needs to be, it has to comply with the open meeting law. And it's not just something that's coming up on your agenda, but something that's likely to come. So if you send to all of your colleagues, I hope I see you all at the next U of A volleyball game, that's not a matter likely to come before the school district governing board. So that would be okay. Okay, your agenda. So this was on an agenda, not in Arizona, in another state. That's it. That's what the agenda said. Anybody see a problem with that?
Yes, not clear enough of what the issue is.
Not clear enough, so the public wouldn't know what that would mean. So that was in Michigan and found to be a similar law to Arizona's, found to be an open meeting law violation. What they actually discussed during that session was somewhat of the things you were discussing here today with the previous presenters, kind of how the board's going to deal with each other. And they called it board housekeeping, and that was found to be a violation of the open meeting law. Okay, so here's a scenario for you. And this is something that might actually come up with you. So you have a list of separations that the board has reviewed in a properly noticed executive session, okay? It's not attached to the public agenda. That list is not. But the list is approved in the open session. So you have your executive session, you review the list. It's not on the agenda. You come out in the open session and move to approve the list that the board reviewed in executive session of separations. And then it's attached to the meeting minutes. Anybody see a problem with that? From an open meeting law perspective. Who thinks it's okay to do that from a pure legal open meeting law perspective? Who thinks it's not? Not sure? This is why it's the graduate course. So the Attorney General says this is okay. The notice requirements for the personnel executive session, you all probably know this, the individuals who are named in there would all have to get notice they're going to be discussed. So if you have a list of 75 separations and you're going to review that in executive session, every one of those 75 people gets notice of that, and they can ask for the discussion of them to be in the open session. So that notice assuming that's taken care of, that's okay. And then if the list that the board approves eventually is attached to the minutes, then the Attorney General says that is sufficient for all of the notice requirements of the statute. Dr. Trujillo picked up his microphone.
Yeah, this is one that we made a change a couple of years ago, and this is how we actually accomplished both. So you know that separations are always listed publicly as a public attachment, and they say separation. But what you get in executive content, not necessarily executive session, you get the category of separation, whether it was resignation, retirement, termination, and unfortunately, sometimes deceased. We don't make that publicly on the public attachment, but we meet the public requirement by listing it as a formal separation from the district, and it is noted, it is posted publicly, and that it is also something that's attached to the minutes. And the reason we made this change is a few years ago, the board was approached by parents that were still grieving, that hadn't yet communicated to all of friends and family in their circle regarding their loss. We had an employee pass on, and it was noted, it was listed publicly as deceased. We also had some situations in the past where listing the particular category of departure from the district could create challenges for that particular employee in other areas, securing other employment or having other issues. So we meet the requirement by just saying separation, and then there's always in executive content the document that will give you the category.
All right, so any questions about that graduate level question? All right. Next we have Robert's Rules. I don't know, I know that I've gone a little long. You had some really good questions. Do you want me to go through what I have, or do you want me to get right to the graduate level of the Robert's Rules?
Let's go for the graduate level.
All right. Gene, if you could. All right. I wanted to give you some trivia about General Roberts, but I'll do that another time. You know what the purpose of it is. Let's go to, these are fun. Okay, so abstentions. That can get boards tied up sometimes. So here's a scenario. The checks are yes votes, the X's are no votes, and the O is an abstention. Does this item pass? Who says it passes? Who says it fails? All right, so you got that one. Next one. So 2 yeses, 1 no, 2 abstentions. Does this item pass? Who says it passes? Who says it doesn't pass? Who's not sure?
I missed the dynamics. Sorry.
Okay, so the O's are abstentions.
Okay.
The checks are yes votes, and the X is a no vote.
No, it doesn't pass.
Okay, so Dr. Ravi, you think it passes?
I say that just because of all the talk about the speaker's race a couple weeks ago, and like people were saying like people abstain, then he needs less threshold to get the speakership when Kevin McCarthy was running. So that's why that's the only reason I answer that way, just in terms of all the dialogue or conversation about that a month ago.
So there's no question you have a quorum here, right? Because the abstentions are counted for quorum. So you got your 5. So in order for an item to pass, you need the majority of the votes. The abstentions are not votes. So 2 yeses and a no means it passes. So theoretically, if you had 4 abstentions and 1 yes vote, that's a pass. There's actually an Attorney General opinion that mentioned that one. Okay, so here's a little curveball to you. So you've got the 2 yeses, an abstention, a no vote, and then someone absent. That's what that dark circle with the line through it is. Does this item pass? You say yes, you think no? Who thinks it does? And who thinks it doesn't? Okay, so remember, it's the majority of those voting. So it's 2 to 1 with 1 abstention, and then you have an absent. So that one passes. Okay, let's go to some amendments. So these are always fun. So there are several ways to amend a motion. You can ask for unanimous consent if it's something that's fairly benign, like maybe the motion was for something to happen on July 1st, but then it turns out that July 1st is a Sunday, so somebody says, oh, can we move that to July 2nd? So something like that is good for unanimous consent. You don't need to vote on it. A standard amendment is, and you did this at your last meeting, you have a motion, someone wants to change it with a phrase or two, and that motion to amend needs to be seconded and voted on, unless there's unanimous consent for it. If it's something more substantive, you're probably going to have a discussion about it. And then what happens if let's assume the amendment passes, then you go back and vote on the original motion. So voting on the amendment doesn't pass the whole thing. You have to go back and vote on the original motion. It's like a tree. You have to go back to the root once you've done the amendment. A lot of discussion in boards has gone around friendly amendments, and how this usually arises is there's a motion and a second, there's some discussion, and someone says, and this is what seems to happen, and we don't know why it started this way. Someone says, can we do a friendly amendment to change it to this? And and for some reason, this process has occurred where people ask the maker and the seconder if they'll agree to that. That's actually not Robert's rules. I mean, it may be a shortcut way of doing things, but sometimes it can confuse things as well. So friendly amendments don't really exist in Robert's rules. The better way to do that is unanimous consent if it's something that is relatively minor, or go through the full amendment process. Yes?
I think to that same vein, I think something really important is that once a motion is seconded, it no longer belongs to the person making the motion, it belongs to the board. So we can't withdraw motions or ask the person who made the motion to withdraw it. Once it's seconded, it's no longer that person's motion anymore. It belongs to the board, and the board needs to deal with it.
Right, and there you can be, so you have a motion and a second, there's discussion, it's clear to the person who made the motion that it's not going to pass the way it is, and they say, I withdraw my motion. Well, the chair and the other board members should say, you can't, it belongs to all of us now, like Dr. Ravi said, and there are a couple of ways you can accomplish, you can vote. I make a motion that the motion be withdrawn, and then everybody votes on whether it's withdrawn. Or if it's something, again, that maybe everybody is in agreement that this isn't the time, the chair can make a sense of that, and is there unanimous consent for the board to withdraw that motion and move on to something else? So you can deal with it that way as well. This is something that was only really I've seen here, and it hasn't happened for a while, amendment by substitution. I want to make a substitute motion. And it really is an amendment. It's not really a substitute motion. It's a full-scale amendment. It may be a completely different approach to the original motion, but it's an amendment. So that should be dealt with as a standard amendment with a second and a discussion and a vote, and then if it passes, go back to the original motion as amended, or if it fails, go back to the original motion without amendment. Okay, so we're going to do a little simulation here, and I'm going to appoint Ms. Luna Rose as the president for this. Okay. So, and I'm going to pretend to be a member of the board here, and I'll make the motion and assume it's seconded. So I think everybody has an opinion on their favorite pizza. So I'm going to make a motion and assume it was seconded that the official pizza of the governing board shall be a deep dish plain cheese pizza. That's the motion. It's been seconded. Ms. Luna Rose, take it from there.
Board members, do you have any discussion? Dr. Shaw.
I'm sorry if I lose votes for anything I do in the future, but I'm going to say I'm going to have a substitute motion that we do pineapple as the best pizza, as the official pizza of the TUSD governing board.
Okay. We do have original motion on the floor, though.
No seconds. No one's really a pineapple favorite.
I think that dies for a lack of second, Dr. Shaw. And we still have Mr. Ross's motion on the floor. Does anybody want to? Well, actually, could we get a roll call vote?
There's no further amendments? Everybody's good with plain cheese pizza?
No.
I didn't think so. Everybody's got an opinion on pizza.
Yes, maybe we should do like half meat lovers and half veggie lovers.
Mr. Romero, are you making that
As an amendment?
as an amendment?
I'll second that.
All right, well, that's been seconded by Ms. Shaw. We will vote on Mr. Romero's amendment. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed?
No.
Nay.
Nay. Okay, item does not pass. Nays have it. So now we have to go back to the first motion on the floor made by Mr. Ross.
Right, unless there are further proposed amendments.
So this could keep going on, potentially?
You're not limited to one motion on an item. Sorry, Dr. Ravi.
I'm gonna call a question.
Yes, sir.
Excellent. So he called the question. How do you deal with that?
Okay, so this is where I get confused with the call of the question.
Okay. So, and this is kind of the graduate level as well. So just someone saying call the question doesn't really do anything from Robert's Rules perspective. It may jog the rest of the board to move on. But officially, if Dr. Ravi wanted to call the question, he would make a motion to call the question. It should be seconded, discussed, and it needs a supermajority. That means 4 of you, because you're ending debate.
So what's the supermajority defined as? 2/3, 3/4?
Well, you already have, your majority now is 3, so supermajority is going to be 4.
What if there's 4 of us?
If there's 4 of you, then 3.
Then 3, okay.
Which is the same as a majority, if there's only 4 of you. So if someone's absent, then 3 will do it. Okay, so you do if he would have to make that, if the chair doesn't say, okay, you're right, it's been enough time to vote, the chair can always call for a vote, okay? But if the chair doesn't seem willing to do that and still wants to discuss it, then the board member can ask for an official vote to call the question. You vote on that, need the supermajority, and then it's over, right? Well, there's 2. You've called the question. Okay, we've called the question. Okay, are we going to end debate? Not the original motion, right? The call the question is ending debate.
Okay.
So you need 4 people to do that. Assume that passes. Now you go back to the original question where you only need 3 to pass it.
So if he calls the question, and meaning ending the debate, and then, we get the majority, then we go back. Supermajority. Then we go back to your, was it pepperoni pizza or whatever it was?
It was the amended motion, which was, no, actually, you're left with You're left with cheese pizza.
Oh, cheese pizza.
Deep
Yeah.
dish cheese.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So because you got two different standards of proof, right? You got 4 votes to end debate, and then you only have a simple majority for the cheese pizza question that's left. And of course, you can continue amending if you want to, or try to do that. But at that point, I think you probably would call the question. 4 of you would probably do that, and then so you get 4 for that, and then vote on the original cheese pizza question.
Most other governing boards or other boards that I watch, when they call the question, they just stop discussion.
Right, and that's the chair. It's technically the chair's call. Like Dr. Ravi would just say, "Call the question. Come on, it's over," and that's a message to the chair, saying, we're done. Now, if the chair doesn't do that, doesn't move to the vote under Robert's rules, then there should be a point of order saying, I made a motion to call the question. Of course, it has to be seconded.
Okay.
But if you, it plays out this way. Dr. Ravi calls the question. Ms. Luna Rose, as chair, wants to continue to discuss it. And then Dr. Ravi could jump in and say, I've made a motion. I'm looking for a second, Madam Chair. And then assuming there's a second, then there should be a vote on calling the question, which is technically ending debate.
Okay, but what about, so Dr. Shaw is currently our board president, so if he calls the question, then, I mean,
That's the flip side, right?
That's the flip side. So as Ms. Ekstrom said, other boards tend to,
right.
feel like they get shut down because the board president has said, I'm calling a question.
Well, and that the chair can do that, but let's say you don't want, 4 of you want to keep talking about it. That's extending the debate, and that's yet another vote. You can basically challenge the chair's call of the question and vote on that, supermajority, continue debate. And that would be a point of order, which we could talk about that a little bit, about the use of that, but I know we've got
That requires
way over.
supermajority as well.
I'm sorry?
That requires supermajority
Yes.
as well to continue.
To extend or limit debate.
About that, so when the chair calls the question, and I think in the past this has happened to us while I was serving, but as far as I remember, it was like, I'm going to call the question, and then Yolanda, can we get a roll call vote? And so what my question is who is the parliamentarian? Is it the sitting chair, or is it you? And if there's a violation of Robert's rules and the president ongoingly violates the rules, at what point do you step in, or is the chair the parliamentarian, or you are parliamentarian?
This board has not chosen a parliamentarian. The chair is responsible for running the meeting according to your rules, but every one of you are parliamentarians as well. So if the chair is violating Robert's rules, then any one of you can make a point of order, and then the chair is supposed to ask you to state the point of order, and you could say, the debate is not finished. And if the chair says, I'm going to call the question anyway, then you can make a motion to appeal the chair's decision. And if you get a second on that, then the chair is supposed to run a vote on the point of order, which only requires a simple majority. I know this gets kind of confusing, but the point of order is whether the chair violated the Robert's rules by calling the question when debate wasn't finished. And if you get a second on that and vote, and and you got 3 people in favor, then the chair would say, okay, the board has spoken, then the debate needs to continue. That hasn't been a big problem here. I think the board has been pretty good about letting everybody say their piece in most cases, but there may be times when there's someone wants to continue discussion, especially as you were talking earlier about wanting to have more discussion among each other. When this is the only time you all get together, you may want to continue that discussion if it's being expositive and can help you with your next vote. I'm going to end it there since we've gone far over, but you all seem to be having fun with it.
Can I have a point of personal privilege? So the pizza with the arugula and the mozzarella is what I would have voted for.
I didn't hear a motion, so.
Well, thankfully, this item is an action item. It's only a study information item, so we can't have bad motions like that destroy the integrity of this fine district. All right. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Trujillo for our last item for tonight, which I hopefully fit into there's a lot of discussions moving forward in the months ahead.
Yes, President Shaw, members of the governing board, and I want to thank our legal counsel, Mr. Ross, and I'd like to welcome our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction. She's joining us momentarily, Mrs. Flora Hewitt, Assistant Sup for Curriculum Instruction. But just to set the backdrop in the context, we are proud of our brand new strategic plan and our vision of inspiring and inspiring excellence in all of our employees and our students so that they can learn and lead to create a better world for us all. We've established 6 strategic priorities, and this is not going to be a repeat of the strategic plan presentation that you saw in the early summer, but now we're going to talk about strategic priorities and how we're going to measure success. Couple of notes, okay, on the key performance indicators that you see. Many of them lack a numeric at this time for 2 reasons. Number 1, this is a baseline year. So this is the very, very first year that we've selected these potential data points as areas that would assess our success with the strategic plan. Number 2 is the second governing board meeting of each month. We are going to bring these KPIs before the board. We're going to be examining a different strategic priority each month during the second governing board meeting and the key performance indicators attached to them. And we're going to show you where we stand right now. Then at that point, we engage you in a discussion about what an appropriate numeric might be. Okay, so for example, we would do one on CTE, which doesn't have a particular numeric right now, but we would present at our designated governing board meeting, examining our strategic priority around college and career readiness, and we would present to you, here's a metric that we're proposing. We want to look at increasing the amount of students that take CTE courses throughout the district and increase the percentage of students that complete full-on 3-year programs. Now, board, here's where we stand right now. We have X amount of students in these programs now. We've achieved X percentage of these students fulfilling 3-year completion requirements. We propose that we increase by 4%. And then you, based off of the data of where we stand, we engage in that discussion where you may say, we think 10% might be a better measure, 7%. So I just want to set that stage and explain why a lot of our identified KPIs right now haven't really attached like hard metrics to them yet. A few do, but the majority of them don't. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mrs. Hewitt.
Good evening, governing board members. Dr. Trujillo, thank you very much for that onset. I will try to be as engaging as our other presentations, but it's our strategic plan, and I'll want to walk you through them and the process that we went through to establish the strategic plan that we have in front of you. Like Dr. Trujillo said, there is opportunity for growth, and we will definitely take your feedback into consideration as we move forward with the plan.
Excuse me, before we go to the first slide, I've asked all the staff when they're coming up here just to introduce themselves, like a quick sentence or two, who you are, what you do, how long you've been with the district, and anything else you want to share about your background.
Absolutely, yes. So my name is Flora Hewitt. I am your Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction. I've been in the district since 2019. Right at that year, I had a baby, I was appointed, and then the pandemic hit. So I feel like just now, this year, I'm kind of getting my bearings together with our district and moving it forward for academic achievement. So very proud to be a TUSD member and proud individual to be contributing to our district. So thank you for that opportunity. All right. Our vision, as you see it in front of you, is to inspire a diverse community, to connect, learn, innovate, and lead for a better world. I'm not going to walk you through every slide, but because you have seen them before, I really want to get into the key performance indicators for our strategic plan. As you can see, our mission as well, how are we going to get to that vision, is to prepare all of our students to be responsible citizens and engage them in authentic learning experiences while embracing cultural diversity. And of course, we have our value statements and behaviors on how we're going to achieve that mission and vision for our district. And you have those 6 statements: excellence, innovation, integrity, diversity, and a caring community. Now, this process took a little bit over 2 years because of the pandemic in developing the strategic plan. So these are the values that the community, the district administrators, teachers, and our community came together to accept as our value statements and behaviors. Now, here we have our district proposed initiatives, and I'm actually going to visit these at the end again because I want to really frame the picture of what our goals are to achieve the mission and vision for our district and how we're going to measure those goals to make sure that we're meeting our commitments. So I will come back to that. So our very first strategic goal, number 1, future-focused learning. This is focused on providing our students with relevant learning experiences that ensure academic growth, that inspire innovation, collaboration, critical thinking to solve real-world problems. One of the things that came out in terms of developing a strategic plan is that we need to prepare our students for future-ready jobs. We can't be in, for example, a 1980s type of environment, because in 10 years from now, where our students graduate, the jobs that we're preparing them for, we have to face them with real-world problems that are relevant to their context. So that is the ideal, making sure that we are focused on future-ready learning. In terms of the commitments for Goal 1, I'm just going to highlight some of the commitments. I'm not going to go through all of them, but for example, implementing a multi-tiered system of support. That means that our Tier 1 instruction is solid, that there's rigor in Tier 1 instruction, and that we're able to identify students that need interventions with our Tier 2 and Tier 3, so that we are very solid with our multi-tiered system of support. Another highlight here in this commitment is to develop and implement a problem-based learning model. So that means creating those relevant experiences that can show students, for example, a problem that's in our context, in our local context, and how do you address that problem? Having them develop those critical thinking skills by engaging them in solutions that are relevant to their context. And you can do this in a way that incorporates math, science, reading in an interdisciplinary way to commit to that goal. So that's one of our commitments for Goal 1. Another one that I wanted to bring into the forefront here is the refining student skills, written, oral communication, critical thinking, that all relates to that future-focused learning. So one of the questions might be, well, how are we going to measure that goal? How are we going to ensure that the metrics that we've set are going to meet that future-ready learning? Now, as Dr. Trujillo said, this is our base year. These are just some key performance indicators that we identified based on the resources that we currently have to be able to demonstrate to you that we can meet these goals. The very first one, for example, increasing the percent of students who are proficient in grades 3 through 8 in English language arts and math. Now, we did put 2% year over year, or a total of 10 over 5 years. And the way we're going to show that metric to you is through our state assessments and through our benchmarks, and we can bring that over to you as we develop our data dashboard. And I believe we presented a prototype for you last year. So that's one of our key performance indicators. Another one, increasing the number of our English language learners that are reclassified every year. We have a large population of English language learners. We wanted to make sure that we acknowledge their reclassification, and that means that they are proficient in the English language and that we're able to provide them with the opportunities, the learning opportunities to make sure that they are proficient in English. So that's another goal that we have, and a key performance indicator is through our state assessment with the Azela. Increase or maintain the percentage of students participating in music and arts courses. Again, based on the resources that we have, we are able to measure this through the participation measures as indicated in our 40th day. Another measure for Goal 1, increasing the percentage of students participating in college and career pathways. We are able to show this data to you through our participation information and our synergy data, whether students are participating in CTE, advanced placement, and GATE services. We're able to demonstrate that with the resources that we have. And then the last key performance indicator for Goal 1 is outperform the state's graduation rate. We, in TUSD, we have a good graduation rate, but we want to be more ambitious in making sure that we outperform the state's graduation rate each year. And we're able to demonstrate that through our data. So bringing that to the forefront is going to be important to meet these goals. Trujillo?
Go back to the previous slide, just real quick. Right, yeah, for goal 1. So just like I said, this is just something that we would come before you and say, this is the state of where we at with ELD or EL student classification. Just a couple of clarifications for those in the viewing public. I don't want to overwhelm us with all the educational acronyms. The AZAASA, that's a replacement for AZ Merit. That's the new Arizona Academic Skills Assessment that replaced AZ Merit. Everybody has to take it. It's in English language arts and it's in math. You'd have to take it grades 3 through 8. Our high schoolers take ACT. And when we talk about the AZELA, that's the state assessment that's used to assess English language proficiency. So when we have students that are in our English language development programs, we want to test ourselves and challenge ourselves to increase the percentage and rate that we're bringing students to English language fluency every year. And then the acronyms that you see there for data source there at the bottom, GATE of course refers to gifted and talented. TWDL is two-way dual language. CTE, career and technical education, advanced placement is AP. And then AVID is a major district initiative, advancement via individual determination.
Thank you, Dr. Trujillo. All right, let's move on now to goal number 2. So one of the goals that we've established is that social and emotional well-being, that we establish a culture that students feel supported, that they have strong relationships with their teachers, that there is a culture of inclusion and resilience within the social and emotional well-being. Now to measure that, before we go into the measurement skill, these are some of the commitments. And I wanted to highlight just a few. The 2.1, for example, making sure that the students feel a sense of belonging, making sure that our practices and our staff feel that they belong in that school community as well, nurturing the well-being holistically of our students, and lastly, making sure that we implement a family engagement framework so that we can build partnerships with our families and the community. So in terms of measuring that indicator or that specific goal, we are going to utilize our student quality survey. So our goal, our key performance indicator, is to increase or maintain the percentage of students and families that indicate that they feel safe and having a sense of belonging in the school year over year. This is data that we have, it's tangible data that we can present to you, and that's the data source that we've identified for this particular goal. Our next strategic goal is equity, diversity, and inclusion. So this is just making sure that that all of our students, no matter where they come from, their backgrounds, that they feel that they are included in terms of our practices and that they have access to educational learning experiences that are authentic and similar to the other one that make them feel that they belong. So some commitments that we have that I wanted to highlight for goal number 3. I wanted to highlight them here. Apologies. So for example, making sure that our students are engaged in leadership skills and practices that focuses on the needs of each student, that we are ensuring that we utilize our families as assets and that the community background and the context is integrated within our teaching practices, that we promote a diverse teaching pedagogy, curriculum materials, and the last piece is that we have policies and practices to support the whole child. This is really about making sure that all of our students have access and they have access to the same learning opportunities as all of our students do. Now, as Dr. Trujillo said, this is a base year. In order to measure some of these practices, So you'll see in the key performance indicators, we are going to promote our equity, diversity, and inclusion statements. We're going to have some culture and climate surveys, creation of school-based equity teams and with engagement reports. A lot of this is going to come out of our equity, diversity, and inclusiveness department, where they will come and provide some reports on how we are doing in terms of making sure that our students and families feel included in the school environment. Because this is a base year, we don't have that tangible data yet, so we need to establish that data and create those reports and bring those to you. And strategic goal number 4.
Go back a slide.
Oh, yes.
Can you go back a slide?
Oh.
So you said that we don't have all the data yet. So are we, when we come to the board with this over the next few months, are you like how are you gonna order these, and when will we get all the data started?
Yeah, so this year, think about it as a planning year. We need to really plan and strategize, and I'm gonna show a timeline of what that might look like for the next few months. So that way you understand that we're going to be planning how to display the data, how to bring it to the board, and making sure that we have all this information to you. Again, this year is the baseline year. We need to identify how we're gonna report this in the best feasible way for our board and our community.
Okay.
For goal number 4, this is a personal favorite of mine because it is about professional growth for our teachers, for our staff, and our community. So we promote a unified culture of relevant professional growth where everyone has the opportunity to be a leader, a designer, and contributor. One of the goals for this area is to really provide our teachers with that differentiated professional development that they deserve so they can continue to provide those authentic learning experiences for our students. So our key performance indicator, the first year when we started, we didn't have the professional learning days. Now that we have that, we really want to make sure that we increase and maintain the percentage of employees that indicate that those sessions are engaging and relevant every year. And that's it's our base year. We're gonna go ahead and establish that and bring that information and data to you to show the effectiveness of those professional learning days. And strategic goal number 5 is regarding community strength, making sure that we build those meaningful relationships with our existing partners, with the community, provide innovative opportunities for our students. And as far as the commitments, I do want to highlight just a few right here. So making sure that we are providing district funding to support school community liaison, establishing annual school partnerships with businesses, colleges, universities, so strengthening those pieces, providing real-world opportunities to strengthen our mentorship, externships. So these are some of the commitments. Now, of course, if we look at 5.2, that's going to be a more challenging one depending on the financial situation of our district and the optimization of resources. So that's something that it may not happen this first year, but we can think about how it can be implemented a few years from now when we are in a good financial status to establish that. Creating school-based services, learning activities that foster the growth of positive community-based relationships and partnerships. So these are the commitments that we've established for goal number 5. And I want to focus on the metrics for key performance indicators. We have 2. So the first one is increasing the number of partnerships with for-profit and nonprofit community organizations. We are able to, with the resources that we have, measure that. We have community engagement questionnaires by schools. We can bring that data to you. The other one is increasing the percentage of students successfully placed in mentorships and externships, internships, and or career technical education programs every year. We are able to show you that data through our career technical education enrollment and through our documents. So we are able to bring that data to you as well. So those are the 2 key performance indicators for goal number 5. Lastly is the optimization of resources. So making sure that we are optimizing all of our resources to advance our district vision and mission. This is probably one of the most important goals that we have in the strategic plan in terms of making sure that we are, for example, in 6.2, investing in providing training to recruit, develop, and retain highly effective staff. In number 6.4, developing our relationships to pursue community and partnerships and funding opportunities, strengthening our recruitment and retention. That's one area that we know we need to strengthen, especially with the teacher shortages across the country. So those are some of the commitments that we have for goal number 6 in the optimization of resources. And as far as our key performance indicators, Some of the things that we have identified that we can present to the board is making sure that our budget is aligned with our strategic plans, with our vision mission, making sure that we are reducing the amount of any unspent district funds annually through making sure that we have additional training for folks in terms of how to utilize and maximize the use of your funding and the resources that you have. Increasing our financial training opportunities for our district stakeholders and reducing annual attrition year over year. We're able to measure that. We have that data with our HR department. And the last part is reducing the time of hiring process. So we have definitely established that as a measure, and we want to bring that to you as we present the monitoring of our strategic plan. So now I'm going to go back to the district initiatives that I had mentioned. So all of these goals, all of these commitments, all of our values come down to what are the district initiatives? How are we going to get there? So we've identified the key performance indicators, we've identified our goals and commitments. Here are the main initiatives. Number one, making sure that instruction is rigorous, that it's engaging and is authentic for our students. That's an area that we need to strengthen. That's a district initiative, and it's going to be achieved through strengthening our MTSS process, which is our multi-tiered system of support, which means that tier one, that very first instruction that students have with their teachers, that is rigorous and engaging. That's the number one goal in district initiative. Number two, we optimize the financial, physical, and digital resources. That goes hand in hand with improving our instructional approach as well. Our next initiative, strengthening our family and community partnerships. Research clearly states that we have to work hand in hand with our community, with our families, to ensure the academic achievement of our students. We want to make sure we strengthen those community partnerships with our families. The last one, TUSD will provide transformative professional learning experiences that promote employee well-being and retain a high-quality staff. Where you have teachers that feel that they are empowered, that feel that they have the tools to engage our students in authentic learning experiences, they will stay with the district if we provide them those tools, especially with the professional development learning experiences. And that's another district initiative that we have. So those are the four that we have. And now I have a very 30,000 foot view overview of how we're going to get to implement our plan. So now that we have our values, our mission, our vision, and all of those components in place, we have identified a team of leaders within the district that are going to be in charge of ensuring that every initiative has action plans designed around it, so that way we can monitor with each other internally, how are we meeting these goals? What are the action steps, the objectives that you're setting to meet these goals? So right now we're doing that in this month, in January, we've established our leadership teams for each initiative. And now the next step is for every team to start developing action plans and say, okay, for initiative number one, this is the resources that I need. These are the roles and responsibilities for the folks that I have identified, and that's what we're doing next. In March, we're going to plan for implementation. As I said, this year is planning. We cannot expect a product of this large to be implemented overnight. So we need to plan for implementation for next year. And we're gonna do that in March, at the beginning of March with our leadership team, developing those action plans, developing those objectives. In April, we'll finalize the monitoring dashboard. I believe we presented a dashboard to the governing board, and that'll be finalized. So that's the plan, to finish a dashboard so you can see the data and the monitoring. And then in May, every team begins taking their action steps for implementation. So making sure that you have everything you need in place to implement the strategies that we have designed around the strategic plan. And then of course, we'll have our quarterly reports in next year presented to the governing board, as Dr. Trujillo had stated. Again, this is just a draft timeline where I'm happy to take your feedback if you'd like me to change anything. So if you want more reports or more monitoring, I'm happy to take that feedback as well.
Section.
Thank you, Dr. Shaw. I just had a question on key performance indicators for Goal 1.
Getting there.
It says increase or maintain the percentage of students participating in music and art courses. So does this include bringing music and art to schools that don't currently have it?
Most of our schools have music and art courses, and yes, that would be a part of that expansion, absolutely. And
They may have it, but they don't have a full-time teacher to provide that to their students, correct?
So this is an example of where we would come and say, tonight we're going to focus on key performance indicator number 3 with regard to goal 1. Here's our recommended action plan. You have X number of schools that have a music teacher. You have X amount of students that are taking music education or visual arts education or performance arts education. To advance this goal, we are recommending the addition of 10 additional staff members. That's how it would play out, and kind of reporting to the board not only where we're at, but then also recommending and presenting our action plan, which could or could not have budgetary implications. Correct. And then would land in the budget process. Okay. So that's kind of how everything would tie back to the strategic plan.
Okay, because just some of the schools that I've been to, they don't have, that provided to them.
We have a lot of schools that still have traveling, itinerant music or visual arts teachers that aren't necessarily stationed at one school. It's incredibly hard to make sure that every kid gets access to music or art when a teacher has to go to 2 or 3 different schools.
Okay.
Ms. Shaw?
Thank you, Dr. Shaw, and thank you, Ms. Ekstrom, for posing that question. I also have a question about this goal. The first item, I would like us to increase that marker to 5% because I just think that we're in such a crisis as far as students who are underperforming, and we need to set the bar high. As Ms. Bacon indicated, she said effective school boards commit to a vision of high expectations for student achievement, and 2% doesn't seem like a high expectation to me. Thinking over 5 years, that's 25% increase, and I think that would get us a long way and get those students on track, you know what I mean? And so I don't know if at this point we can recommend that this changes, and if it has to go through a motion, but I would like us to aim higher on that indicator.
So this is informational right now. So what they said they're going to do, they're going to come back to us with actual data and where we stand as a baseline, so we can figure out where we want to have our goals over the next couple of years. We don't even know what our baseline number is right now. We don't have that available to us at this time. I think they know it because it's something we track already. But we'll have a chance and opportunity to really weigh in on the goals and metrics over the next couple of years and what our targets are going to be.
Yeah, so Governing Board Member Shaw, that's exactly right. And then we would come with a recommended action. Because then our job would also be to inform the board of, in your recommendation, let's say that 5% was something the board would consider. Our job would be able to present to you what the action plan is and to be fully transparent. That would probably require more benchmark testing, which the community would have to know, and we know that there are concerns about how often we're teaching tests, that we're preparing students for the test. We sometimes get the pushback that we're testing too much, so that the board has a 360-degree view of whatever the recommendation is, so you know exactly what would go into our plan. That's the purpose of coming once a month and really taking a look at, in this baseline year, where you want to set that mark. And that mark could be 5%, could be 4%, could be 6%, but that's really what we'll be doing.
Michelle.
Thank you. I wonder because we do sort of have a baseline because we have the past test results, right? And then maybe IXL data. And so I think we kind of know where we're falling on, on all of those measures, ELA, math. And so could we use that previous data as a jumping off point?
Well, like President Shaw said, tonight is informational. So we're coming back because you may want to set different targets for different grades. So you had tremendous advancement, 6 to 8% growth with some of your earlier grades with regard to math, but then you have negative, I think we were negative at 5th grade. So we want to present to you here's what everybody is doing on a grade by grade level. What do you think would be an acceptable metric to set? And you may want to go by the grade level. we also haven't really taken a look at what other schools in Arizona are doing, as well as, you know, their grade levels and how they compare to us. So that's why our job is to actually come back, show you in a more detailed way, have the board weigh in on what the metric that they believe that they want to see.
Mr. Romero.
So on here it talks about frequency, like on this one that has everything annually. I've seen some that said quarterly, some that said biannually. So does this mean, and then like the last slide, it showed, you know, the next school year, and it had quarterly as far as, I guess, frequency. So that mean, I guess I just want to make sure I'm clear on that. Are we going to go through all these KPIs on a quarterly basis, or when it says annually, only going to come to the board and then annual?
That's a great question. So this is just referencing that specific key performance indicator when it's collected. So annually, for example, the state assessment is once a year that it's collected, but we can collect benchmark data that will present quarterly information as well.
Well, I'm just wondering if we're giving something to show our progress, you know, for like, you know, we're working on getting our kids to, you know, 2% a year. If we, I guess I would just like to make sure we don't take our eye off the ball and say we're going to talk about this and we're not going to talk about it for another year, and then in this whole time there's been no progress and nothing for us to say, well, why did we not do these things earlier? And said, oh, it just didn't work out.
Absolutely, and if you take a look at the state assessment, if we were to dig down a little bit deeper with the district, we have our benchmark assessments. Those are taken every quarter, and that's data that we can provide as well.
One of my goals and what my conversation with Dr. Trujillo has been is to every month this information coming to us. So every month, twice a year, we're addressing one of our strategic priorities. And that way, you know, if it all comes at once, then it gets overwhelming and we don't have the time to really dig into it. But if it comes to us twice a year, we have a small group of key performance indicators and the dashboard data for those key performance indicators for a small group of indicators, then every month we can look into it and ask questions and kind of really evaluate, you know, how we're making progress in the district. For some things, we might not have new data, but we might have, you know, other kinds of data. So it might not be the ASA score, but we might have some other data to look at or to ask questions about as we get into it. So my hope is that and I know your slide in terms of timeline talked about quarterly reports. My hope is that we have a monthly report with one strategic priority each month that comes to us so that we can really dig into that a little bit.
Perfect, absolutely.
Ms. Luna Rose.
Thank you, Dr. Shaw. Thank you for the presentation. So just two quick questions to kind of piggy off back, Ms. Shaw. And I know this is just information, but when this comes back, can we get you know, what is the state's graduation rate? Because that would be nice to know.
Yeah.
And then number two, is this taking into account the COVID years? You know, the testing when kids were at home, because that to me seems to be an outlier and kind of skews the data. So is that being taken into account, or is that going to be like a side-by-side matrix? I mean, how is that being addressed?
So actually the COVID year is over. So this was the test results that we received is the actual first year that kids were fully back in school and everybody was required to take the test. That was 21-22. So we're now operating off of 21-22. 2021 was kind of that last year where, number one, AZ Merit was in its final year and it was optional. So kids didn't have to come in and take it. We had a 50% take rate. 50% of the kids actually took it. Some of our highest achieving students just didn't take it. So you had predominantly our students that were off grade level taking it, and the ones that would probably ace it really kind of blew it off that particular year. So that's behind us now. Now we're operating off of 100% of the district that was required to take the new assessment, took it last year. We received our results. That's where we saw some explosive growth. And now we need to work on proficiency. If we're going to maintain those letter grades, we have to work on increasing the percentage of students that pass the test, math and English language arts. Because the school letter grade, it gives you points for both. It gives you points for moving students across performance levels. Groups of students that go from really minimally proficient on the test and then move to almost proficient, you get a lot of points for that. But at some point, you have to move them to actual proficiency, which means passing the test. And that's going to be the situation that the district is in with a lot of our schools that saw their letter grades go up because of the growth. And in order to keep the letter grades, they're going to have to now have passage rates that are similar to what they saw with growth. So that's why with the student achievement data, we do need to come back, and that's one of those monthly reports that it has to be the only item of the agenda to say, this is where your kids are at. This is how they're performing by each grade level. Here's math, here's ELA. You may want to set different metrics for different grade levels, okay? Because each grade level is kind of a different situation. You may want to do something with exceptional education. You may want to set a target for English language learners. So that's why this is base, and we're going to be back with a lot more information to help you flesh that out.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and forgive my speed over here, get through the last piece. Okay, so we are working on a prototype to make sure that we have a dashboard available to the community as well as to our internal employees, so that's in the works. Now that we have our key performance indicators, it's going to be easier for us to show that data as we progress through it. This is another snapshot we had, and this is just an overview of the next steps. As I stated earlier, establishing our effective leadership teams to make sure they develop those action plans that are guided by our goals, our commitments, and initiatives, and then finalizing our data dashboard to reflect our progress and coming back to the board with additional information in terms of monitoring and that rigor. So that concludes my presentation. Are there any other questions?
Any further questions? Thank you, Ms. Hewitt.
All right, thank you very much. Have a great evening.
And our last but not least agenda item tonight is future meeting dates and agenda items. I'll turn it over to Dr. Hewitt to preview some of our next meetings coming up.
Yes, President Shaw, members of the governing board, a couple of agenda items to highlight coming up on February 16th. Number one, we have a publicly posted performance impact analysis report on gifted and talented enrollment and some proposed changes that we're going to be asking the governing board to consider with regard to the identification of students qualifying for gifted and talent. Going to have a presentation ready for you on February 16th. And also February 16th, a great refresher for the board and the public. We're going to be doing a thorough review of all of the governing board appointed committees that are currently active, as well as membership, so the board can engage in a discussion on the status of all of its appointed committees and any discussions about changes or modifications.
And just a quick note that our next meeting is going to be not on Tuesday, but it'll be on a Thursday, February 16th.
It is a Thursday.
So that everyone can spend time with their family and loved ones on Valentine's Day, which is on a Tuesday. So remember, Thursday, February 16th for our next governing board meeting. I'll turn over to the governing board members for anything on this item. So hearing none, I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much.